Thank you. Hello, good, thanks. How are you?
Okay, Madam Clerk, being past the stated hour of 9:30, we call the Public Works Committee meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the City's website. Other individuals and the media may also be audibly and or visually recorded at this meeting. Report to Council. As committee members know, our procedural bylaw requires a motion at Council to waive the 48-hour rule if we wish to present the report from today's meeting at Council's tomorrow night. Public Works staff and the committee clerk have advised that there are no time-sensitive matters that require the report to go to Council tomorrow night. Is it the wish of the committee to present our report at Council tomorrow night, or would it prefer to present it at the May 14th Council meeting? Moved by Councillor Marilla, second by Councillor Collins. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. So we waive the rules for the end of 48 hours and have it at Council for tomorrow night.
Chairman, just want to make sure, can the clerk have it ready for tomorrow night?
I will do that, sure.
You're going to work overtime? Okay, thank you.
I can do that, sure.
Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, added as item 10.1, notice a motion respecting a playground project at Career Park number 1. And 10.2, notice a motion tree removal at 269 Eaglewood Drive.
We have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Councillor Marilla, second by Councillor Collins. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 7, 2014, moved by Councillor Basuta, second by Councillor Jackson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 4.1, delegation request. We have a delegation request from Isaac Neven and Brett Bailey of the Crown Point Youth Council respecting a proposal for a family bike skills park. The committee clerk has indicated that Mr. Neven and Mr. Bailey have asked for the committee's permission to speak at today's meeting because of the seasonal nature of their presentation. If the committee is in agreement with the request, may I have a motion to agree to hear the delegation request from Mr. Neven and Mr. Bailey today's meeting? Moved by Councillor Marilla, second by Councillor Collins. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Consent items. 5.1, intersection control list. Is there any discussion of 5.1? Could I have a mover of the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Collins, second by Councillor Marilla. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 5.2, capital project status report as of the December 31st, 2013. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, could I have a motion to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Basuda, second by Councillor Marilla. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 6.1, public hearing delegations. At this point, I would ask Isaac Neven and Brett Bailey, representing the Crown Point Youth Council, representing the proposal for a family bike skills park.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just talked to the clerk. I apologize for interrupting. 5.3 as well on consent. You might just want to deal with that before the delegation.
Sure.
I just talked to Laurie. Thank you.
It's not on my roadmap. Okay. Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor? Any discussion? Carried. Okay, can I have you bring that mic right down? There we go. Please introduce yourselves.
Good morning. I'm Isaac, and this is Brett, Frida, and David. How many of you rode bikes when you were kids? Well, we like riding bikes and would like your support in building a bike skills park. I will now walk you through the proposal. Does everyone have one? Yep. Okay. So, we would like your support to build a family bike park, a family skills bike park. So we would like one to get kids off, to stop riding off on the streets, like jumping off of curbs and stuff, and stop building jumps on the escarpment, because right now kids are building jumps on the escarpment and they are getting hurt on them. And so we would like your help to build a pump track so that kids can get off the streets and off of jumps on the escarpment, and they can ride a legal and well-built pump track. So what a pump track is so it's a loop of just little, it's just mounds of dirt that when you go over them, you pump your bike, and well, you just push your body down on your bike, and then so you can build up speed when you go around. It improves your biking skill, and so it helps you to become a better biker, and yeah, and it's safe. So anyone can use a bike. Anyone can use a pump track at all. If you have a bike, you can use it. So anyone can join in the fun. There's a lot of good things about it. It gives you great exercise. It's a low risk of getting hurt. Brings community together. It's simple and fun. Why we want to do this now is lots and lots of kids are getting bikes in the neighborhood. For instance, Bike for Mike happened a little while ago. They gave out around 500 bikes. So that's 500 more kids that need a place to ride and don't have a place to ride. And then New Hope Community Bikes, they sell around 10 bikes a year. So that's a lot more kids. I mean, a day, sorry, not year. So that's a few more kids too that need a place to ride. And there's not a very big risk. There's a little risk, but not very much. If it's built properly, if it's built properly, there's not a huge risk at all at getting hurt. It's easy to do. It's not really hard to do. It's not big jumps or anything. It's just really easy to do. So there's a low risk of getting hurt. Many cities around us are doing this. And so like Cambridge, Kitchener, Toronto, Oakville, and many more are doing this. So that's also another reason why we want to have this now. And so the proposal, so we would like to have just a small pump track in Gage Park for a 2-year pilot project, beginning this summer, going through to fall 2016. On the next page, it shows where we would like to have our pump track. We'd like it in the corner of the southwest corner of Gage Park, right by the Lawrence Avenue, right beside the tennis courts. So yeah, that's where we'd like it, just for 2 years, just as a pilot project. So yeah, will you help us with this?
Tell me what it looked like.
Oh yeah. On the next page, it just shows all different pump tracks. On Appendix A, it shows the top one. That's a smaller. That's how small they can be. They can be very, very small, very, very big. They don't harm the environment. You can build them, like if you there's a tree in the way, you build around the tree. You don't have to cut down any trees. So yeah. So.
Any further comments, Isaac?
Pardon?
Is there anyone else speaking? Is that it?
Oh,
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have Councillor Merla who has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Isaac, great job. If you could just take the opportunity to introduce everyone that you're with, or if they want to come up to the mic, just to mention their name, and perhaps you can do that yourself, Isaac.
Yeah, okay, so this is Brett. Me and him are the ones trying to get this. This is Frida and David. They're also willing to help with this, so they can go there and help.
Excellent. And to you, Mr. Chairman, Isaac, can you explain, last night there was some good news too with the official position of Crown Point. Can you elaborate on what happened last night?
Okay, so we spoke to the Crown Point Youth Hub, the hub, and everyone there thought it was a great idea. They're in favor of this, and yeah, they're supporting it.
And to you, Mr. Chairman, also additionally this morning, we all received an email from the Beasley community.
Yeah, I got an email. They said that they are supporting this too.
Fabulous. At the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I do want to move a motion to support this endeavor and have staff report back accordingly with all options and alternatives. But for the time being, those are all my questions at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Just one question to Isaac. Isaac, do you know the difference, because I don't, between a pump track and a BMX track?
So what's different is a BMX track is a lot, it's really wide, and it's just straight, a couple turns, and then it just ends. It doesn't go around, and they're mainly used for racing, whereas this isn't for racing purposes, so
Okay.
if you don't want to race, you don't have to. Also, BMX courses are mainly like locked up and you need a membership to use them and stuff. This would be free to anyone in the community, and it's a circle, so you can go over and over and over. It's really fun.
Okay, because in my community, a place called Jerseyville Woodlot, where the kids went down and built what they said was a BMX track, which is jumps and turns. So that's really a pump track then, is it?
No, a pump track isn't really for it. You can't, like, it's not for jumping. It's just for rolling over.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other speak? Councillor DeVille.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and Isaac, thanks very much. You did a great job up there, and we're all proud of you coming forward today in the council and expressing your views. I know when I was a smaller child, and I used to ride a bike, and we used to go up to the dump in Burlington and use those, we called them the dune hills, and we did the same thing. But I've also, up in the mountain, I've heard expressions of to me from other children that they need an area to ride their bikes and do the same thing as you're requesting to do. So I think it's a great proposal you're asking us, and I know Councilor Merla is going to bring something forward, so I'm very supportive of it, and I think it's great work. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Pursuit to take the chair. I want to thank Isaac, Brett, Frida, and Dave for coming up and championing this particular issue. I actually was very supportive of a BMX track being located somewhere in Hamilton. about 3 years ago, we have a BMX champion from my ward, and they have to go out of town to actually practice on a sanctioned track. So we don't have a BMX sanctioned track in the city of Hamlin, so that's certainly something to keep on the radar. But this would be the beginning, because I think what you're talking about is a track that it provides opportunity for developing those skills if you want to advance into the BMX. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I just coincidentally on Sunday went out and bought my son a brand new mountain bike. The last one he was jumping curbs and broke the rim. So obviously I'd rather him be jumping on a skilled track than jumping out in the street. So really appreciate your presentation. Wonderful job. And I know that Councillor Marilla and I believe Councillor Morrill will be very supportive of this endeavor. So thank you once again for coming forward. Councillor Marilla.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Collins that we refer the presentation and the request accordingly to staff and incorporate the Gage master plan, which fits nicely with this request itself, and as well as the outdoor recreational facilities and sports field provision plan. And I do want to emphasize that we're going to move quickly on this, but not because of this committee or council, but because of today's presentation. And I think it truly speaks volumes when you have a group of young residents, and in my case, particularly from the east end of Hamilton, being so proactive in identifying a need, putting forward a presentation, and then actually seeking out other endorsements throughout the community and neighborhoods accordingly. I think that, to me, is an incredible thing, and I just want to applaud you publicly today. And I proudly moved this, seconded by Councillor Collins. And for the record, as Councillor Whitehead alluded to, I did speak with Councillor Morrill, and Councillor Morrill, being the representative of the Gage Park area, wanted to strongly be in favor of this proposal. But I want all of you to go away today, the four of you to go away, knowing that it's because of you and not anyone else. Okay? Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much. I need a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Marilla, second by Councillor Basuda. All those in favor? Carried. Presentations. We have 7.1 is a presentation respecting the 2015 Pan Am Games. I ask Corley Secor to please come forward. Oh, sorry. That's right. We have to deal with your motion. Was second by who? Councillor Collins. Moved by Councillor Marilla, second by Councillor Collins. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, Corley.
Perfect. Thanks. Through the chair, I want to say thank you very much for having me come to update you today on the Pan Am Games. I just want a couple of opening thoughts before I get into the presentation. I've worked 38 years and I've never been in public works, and I just want to acknowledge Jerry and his PW management team for all the support they've given for these games. They've got behind it, they've made it very exciting, and they have certainly supported the Pan Am team. We also want to talk about legacies. We hear lots about legacies that are left after we host such games. We've been out doing numerous presentations in the community, and we hear loud and clear the pride and the proud community that we've had some 10 years later after hosting the World Cycling Championships. That pride sort of resonates as we get out there and chat with the community, to the point that many people still want to become involved in the Pan Am Games because of that legacy, and or they want to stick around and participate. If you recall, World Cycling, we encourage people maybe to leave if they didn't want to be a part. Well, most people now want to stay and be part of the games. So given that, in approximately 16 months from now, we will be welcoming the Americas, and that's the greater Golden Horseshoe area. The vision for the games is to ignite the spirit through sport and culture. Just a little bit about the Pan Am Games. It's the largest international multi-sport event ever held in Canada. For comparison purposes, it's twice the size of the Vancouver Olympics. The dates for the games, and we are just a Pan Am sport facility, so the games are from July the 10th to the 26th. We're expecting 10,000 athletes, coaches, and officials. It's a 16-day event. There are 41 competition locations spread across what they're calling the Greater Golden Horseshoe. It encompasses 17 municipalities, and it's a 10,000 square foot footprint. So it's a rather large one, and there are 51 competitive sports, of which there'll be 400 sessions. So you can see that the large footprint has made for a lot of planning and coordination in order to move everybody through the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Hamilton, our role is that we're soccer central. During the games period, the stadium will be known as the CIBC Hamilton Pan Am Soccer Stadium. CIBC, as a major sponsor for the games, was given the opportunity to host or to have their name tied to 3 facilities, of which they picked the new stadium. We will be hosting soccer from the preliminaries right through to the finals. We can expect 8 men's teams and 8 women's teams to compete. I know a lot of people think the 41 countries, but they have to qualify down, and we get it down to 8 teams on either sides of the gender. It's 16 days, and we start what they call minus T1, which will start on July the 9th. Schedule is still being refined, but we will start on the 9th. We will have nothing on the 10th, and we will resume again on the 11th. We will have 2 games per day, and they will be on the weeknights. First game will be at 5. Second game will be at 8, and there'll be 2 games on the weekends, and they'll be in the late afternoon and the early evening. We will be welcoming, if all goes accordingly, about 280,000 spectators, and soccer represents, just to show you the magnitude of it, it's one of the premier events, 1/3 of the ticket sales for the entire games. We turned the stadium over to Toronto 2015 on June the 8th, and they maintain the stadium until August the 6th. So from June the 8th till July 1st, they are doing what they call the games overlay. They're readying the stadium to prepare for the event to happen. So from July 1st to the 8th, the stadium must be ready in games mode to have the teams come and practice. Our first game, as I said earlier, is July the 9th. July 25th will be the women's gold medal and the bronze medal game. July 26th is the men's gold medal game. We're expecting teams on the under 22 age group, which we're sort of excited about because in the next year becomes a qualifier for the Olympics, and they then become the under 23. We will know in late February which teams will be competing. The ticketing strategy for the games, all tickets, Toronto 2015 has taken a approach to keep the games very accessible. So all ticket prices will be under the $45 mark, and if you compare that to the Olympics and other games, that's substantially affordable. Soccer preliminary rounds, a family of 4 will be able to participate for $60. What that is adults are 20 and children are half price. A ticket is a 2-game. It's a day ticket, so you get the 2 games. It is also an integrated ticket, so you'll be able to access any of the transportation modes from the GO train to HSR to the shuttles to the TTC in order to make your way to the games. So this offers a seamless transition to have people move through the games footprint. They are also to be known as the People's Games, and what we mean by that is that the games will be affordable and accessible, and they will be a celebration of athletic achievement. So all of the venues have been sized to be able to accommodate and keep them authentic, which means people will be close to the athletes. They'll be able to see the athletes very closely. The athletes will be joining them in the stands and trying to keep that bond, which you would never find in an Olympic championship. They are also about celebrations and festivities. They also provide for a lasting legacy, and as we all know, they're a power of good. Who does what in the games? The games operations, and that's anything that happens, what I'm going to call inside the ropes, around inside the stadium, and sort of outside the stadium that's affiliated with running the soccer event, are run by Toronto 2015. So we will only support that event, but it's actually, they bring in the sports technical aspect, they bring in all the volunteers, and they will run the soccer event. We are responsible for the celebrations. So we are responsible for all the live sites that go hand in hand to provide an overall experience for the games. Where are we today? We've established a volunteer host committee, which is made up of sports organizations, businesses, cultural groups, those that, from the community who just wanted to be active. And what we've done with that group is we've engaged the community, and we've hosted 2 community forums, of which we had over 200 people come from the community to share their ideas on what they wanted to see from the Pan Am Games. So we've developed a host showcase program. That program highlights a number of initiatives that will happen pre, during, and post games, and I will be bringing that report forward to the next subcommittee meeting, which speaks to all of the initiatives that have rolled out from our community engagement sessions. What we've tried to do is follow the council's goals, which were set out when we first bid for the games, and that was to talk about the games' legacy, cultural opportunities, active and healthy living, sport development, skill development. And just on that note, we've been working with Mohawk College, and we've had a number of the trades on the stadium being able to learn and practice alongside the work that's going on at the stadium. And the other piece from the skill development is the volunteers, which I'll speak to a little bit later. We're looking at economic development and tourism, and we've also had a large community engagement session. We've also have an internal working group, which is made up of various reps from all of the departments across the city. We meet monthly. This group addresses the city services and operations, so from transportation, security, consequence management, public health, communications, festivities, pageantry, and wayfinding. So we're just going to make sure that everything around the city operates from what we do in our way of delivering services. This group is also well on the way with having 3 plans that are underway. We've got a transportation plan, which is a local transportation plan, which identifies the games route network. It talks about the transportation options, so we have various ways to get to the stadium, not just by car. And we want to look at how we keep the city functioning and a communication plan. So as you know, there's going to be a little bit of disruption down around the stadium, so we need to be able to make sure we're communicating to the residents in that neighborhood and anybody that might commute through that route during the games period. Our police are very involved in the games security. They have been commissioned by the OPP, who is responsible for game security, to provide the security around the stadium, and they will also be helping us with our live sites. We've also have our emergency planning, which includes fire, EMS, ambulance, public health, involved in a consequence management plan should anything happen around the stadium during the games period. We also have the cultural festivities, and in order to take full advantage of the games, the cultural festivities will have a significant impact on the overall quality. We're looking at 16 days of celebrations. The events will be free. The festivities will celebrate the Pan Am countries and cultures. It will be live sites with activations with music, sport, art, dance, and food. We're looking at walking tours. We're looking at having the BIAs to play a role. We will involve local entertainment, and it's an opportunity to engage all the communities of Hamilton. We're looking for lots of locations to be having live sites. We want to encourage residents to stay and enjoy, and we're looking for some ticketed events, maybe at COPS or the art gallery, that sort of tie in the whole cultural festivities. Some upcoming events that we have, we've got the Queen's Baton, which is coming to the stadium on May the 2nd. This is the Commonwealth sort of torch run. Instead of a torch, it's the Queen's Baton that will come. It's coming to Ottawa, and it's coming to the birthplace of the British Empire Games, which is Hamilton, and we're planning that on May the 2nd. It's a great day. Our plans and our thoughts around what we want to do during that day has garnered the support of the Minister for Sport in Manchester, and she will be coming over to experience our event because she was quite excited about seeing the birthplace of the Commonwealth Games and the plans that we have. We also are responsible for a one-year countdown celebrations, and we're looking at doing that on the weekend of July the 12th and 13th, and we plan to, on July the 12th, light up the waterfront, and we're going to have a fun walk, run, move type party that has you walking or running a kilometer, then you'll dance, then you'll move on to the next kilometer, and you'll finally finish up in a large area that will have a video dance party for people to participate. Everybody will be donning their neon glasses, wristbands, and their neon shirts, of which to light up the night. On the 13th, we will having some cultural activations down on the waterfront with food, dance, and sport, and we'll finish off the day with watching the FIFA World Cup on the large screen TV that we will have up at the waterfront. We also are responsible to do a test event to show that we're games ready, and our test event will be the Ontario University Athletic Soccer Championships, and that's scheduled for October the 30th to November the 1st, and it's the first time the OUAs have hosted the men's and women's soccer in the same venue, and it will certainly give us a model for what it's going to be like for hosting 2 games a day. We also will have the Torch Run, which will be Hamilton Day, which is Aboriginal Day on June 21st, 2015, of which the torch will make its way to Hamilton. And we've also got the Kids and Play program that we're rolling out. It's a Pan Am initiative that we're rolling out across all of our camps this summer, and it will continue in our rec centers over the fall and winter months. So that's sort of a quick overview of where we are and what we've got, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. I have Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Corley. Thanks for your presentation today. And I just wanted to expand a bit on, I think you called it Soccer Central, the Pan Am Steering Committee. We only get one chance for a first impression for all the visitors that are going to be coming here. And whether it's the Winter Olympics, and as you say, this is bigger than the Winter Olympics or the Super Bowl, there's an area for people who come to the games before and after the game, but more importantly for our own citizens too, to come down and celebrate this. And at the Stadium Subcommittee meeting, we were, which has had its scope expanded to help you with this, you were kicking around 2 locations, James Street North and Gage Park, as a place for having soccer competitions and entertainment and other events. And I know you got a party person coming on staff here soon. Maybe you could just explain who that is. And
for sure.
That she did the bicycle race.
Yep, for sure. The Pan Am team right now is made up of Greg Maychek and myself, and joining us in June will be Shelley Merlot. She's coming back. She's taking a year sabbatical, which works for us. Not only are we getting a great person, you recall Shelley did World Cycling. She's done all of the events across the city for numerous years, and I think for those who've been around for a while, they'll acknowledge what a great asset she will be. And the joyous part about it is that we get her for 40% of her income, and the school will pay the other 60%. So we've been able to leverage with Niagara College in order to have Shelley work with us. She'll be starting in June. We really haven't identified where the cultural sites are going to be yet. We're looking at James Street North, we're looking at Gore Park, and we're looking at Gage and the waterfront. We're just sort of in the planning stages for that. We're looking at doing a bang-up job on the weekends and then going more to a celebration square on the weeknights, which again would probably be in the downtown core, James Street North, and then looking at coming in the middle weekend, again, probably heading down to the waterfront and then finishing up with a bang-up job on the final weekend. So as we continue to roll those plans out and as we continue to engage the community, I'll continue to come back to update you.
Okay, and I appreciate just sharing that with the committee because, as you know, inside the ropes, we lose complete control of that. That's turned over to Toronto 2015, and the police are, as you know, getting ready to provide all the necessary security in there. But it's important that we have some place for the public to go. I know had the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl this year, and Broadway was turned into Super Bowl way, and you could kick field goals or take toboggan runs down this big slope they built, and there's dignitaries that would come and speak, and the Lombardi Trophy was on display. We just need to get that right, and so I'm pleased you're bringing someone on who has experience with that, because we do get a lot of positive feedback still from the bicycle race.
Yes, exactly.
To make sure we get that right. So am I hearing we may be looking at more than one venue to do that?
Well, we'll move it. We would move it. So we're looking at possibly just trying to engage as many parts of the community as we can. So we would move it around a little bit, just to ensure that we're having everybody has the opportunity to participate.
Okay, it'd be difficult though to move stages or toboggan run or soccer pitch or something like that. And so it just concerns me a touch that we're just over a year away, and this stuff takes a lot of planning. So hopefully we can kick this up on June the 1st when Shelley comes on board. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Powers.
Who needs the Lombardi Cup when we've got the Allen Cup, right, Scott? My question is with regards to legacy. I recall kind of in the very early stages, the Pan Am and the Toronto 2015 indicated they were putting together a legacy program that would provide ongoing funds. My recollection was this wasn't part of the legacy. If we had gone with a velodrome, which Milton will get ongoing legacy funds as a result, but can you just confirm or deny that we're eligible for legacy funds?
I can confirm we're not eligible for legacy funding. The legacy funding has gone to the track, has gone to the velodrome, and has gone to the aquatic center at York University. So those are, at Toronto University. So those are where the legacy dollars have gone. Had we kept the track and had we got the velo, we would have been in for some funding.
My final question is, Corley, what is it that the city has? Is it exclusively soccer and nothing else? I mean, there was a number of things that were in play at the time, including enhancements of the I'm going to call it the practice pool at McMaster University, all those things. My thinking is the soccer facility, the conversion of the Tim Horton Field into the soccer stadium exclusively now.
That's it. Originally we were to have a number of events, but as happens with many bids, the things change as they start to refine budgets. So what they did was move to clusters of venues, and then they moved to individual, what they called sport venues. So we became the sport venue for soccer, and this changed a little bit because originally we were only to have the preliminary rounds and the finals were to be in Toronto, but now they have given us the whole entire sport.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Excellent update and presentation, Corley. General Manager Davis, I was at Corley's, I thought it was her retirement a couple of years ago, and I think the next morning General Manager Davis put in an SOS and said, "You're not leaving anywhere, Corley." And a great coup on your part, all kidding aside, General Manager Davis. Corley, we're lucky to have you at the helm, along with Greg Maychuk and your entire team. Just curious, the 20,000 volunteers, are they in place, Corley? Is it a matter of still recruitment, Mr. Chairman, through you, because this is a key component, and I know the excitement is building in our city. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Corley.
The call for volunteers just started on April the 8th. All volunteers, because of security, must go through Toronto 2015. So we're expecting about the need for 2,000 volunteers. So right now the counts are, the last one we got just before Easter was that we were about 550 volunteers that had registered. So we're well on our way. I have no doubt that we'll get the 2,000 volunteers that we need in order to function for Hamilton.
Terrific, Corley. And from City Council and Public Works Committee end, everything's in place. I take it that probably through your upper management, if there's anything more to make sure this is the spectacular event for our city, the prestige of it, and next year's calendar, I'll take it that between you and General Manager Davis, you'll advise this committee or council if there's any further support you need, of course, with all rationalization coming forward. But at this time, Mr. Chairman, through to Corley, is everything in place, budgetary-wise, resource-wise, tangible, intangible support? Because we definitely want to put on, we want to put a showcase on for the world. Mr. Chairman, through to Corley.
The first part of it is I believe that we have support of the team in place with the host committee, with the internal working group. I will be bringing the report forward to the subcommittee, which is an ask for some funding, which will come forward. With that is about, I think, how many is Q? Don't know how many letters of the alphabet, but I go to Q in legacy initiatives that we're bringing forward. Some of them will be funded through regular programs. Some of them are stuff that we're doing, and some of them we will have an ask for some funding.
Okay, excellent, Coralie. Look forward to it, Mr. Chairman. Thanks so much, Coralie.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Murillo to take the chair for a moment. Coralie, going through the presentation, wonderful job. I didn't expect anything less from the team that we have. But what's not there is, and I know that the BIAs, as the chair of, well, it's not happy anymore, but the advisory committee, they've taken a real keen interest in participating, whether it's banners along their stretches and mini festivals and mini shopping spree opportunities for our guests during the Pan Am stay. Yet I don't see any reference to the BIAs in this presentation.
In the cultural festivities, we have indicated that we would be using the BIAs and asking them to do a number of activations. On Wednesday, I have all the BIAs coming together with Toronto 2015 to talk about the Ignite program, which is a granting program out of Toronto 2015 to help them with some funding opportunities. We want all the BIAs involved. We just sort of needed to get our plans together in order to roll them out to the BIAs. So we certainly want to have everybody. We certainly want them to be live sites, and we are certainly encouraging them to be part of it.
So when people arrive in Hamilton during the festivities, during the Pan Am Games, what is the first thing they're going to see when they enter into Hamilton?
Well, we'll have wayfinding all the way through. There'll be some pageantry that will mark the Games route network. So how we're bringing the people in, will come in the 403 to Main, and as soon as they hit the city limits, we'll have off of Main Street, there'll be pageantry. It'll direct them all the way down to the stadium and or to our live sites. We plan on pulling together a number of toolkits from brochures to activations. We're going to have a number of information centers with Tourism Hamilton playing the key role. All of our municipal service centers will have all of the literature for our what we're calling our local residents who want to go and find information, and we're also looking at a hub to be in Gage Park, which is within the stadium precinct.
And can I ask, obviously there'll be a number of people staying in local hotels within the Golden Horseshoe that may have interest in the festivities here in Hamilton as well as the soccer games. What exactly are we doing with the hotels?
Right now, we had a session on April the 10th with all of the hotels, all of the businesses, and it was an opportunity for how they could get involved. So right now, we have some rooms on hold at the Sheraton that we know we need for the FIFA officials. They will most likely stay in Hamilton because they will want to be close to the venue. But as for the rest of it, all of the hoteliers are aware. They have an understanding of what's happening, and they will get their literature and all of their information in any of our guides. We're pulling together through the RTO, which is the Regional Tourism Office, the hotel packages, so they will be disseminated to Toronto 2015 to take down as they start to flood the Americas with the information.
And those packages in the hotels would include where they can catch shuttles and so forth?
Exactly. We plan on having shuttles in the downtown core in order to get people to the stadium. As you know, we've got some parking pressures down there. If we have a full stadium, we need 3,600 parking spots, which are not the easiest to find down in that neighborhood. So we are going to be definitely encouraging people to take the shuttles. We'll have shuttle services across the entire city.
And in all this, we know that we have the Scott Park precinct, and do we know what stage, we have envision what stage of progress the Scott Park precinct will be during the games?
Is that the construction of the new rec center? That won't start till post games.
What will we be looking at on that site during the games?
You will be looking at currently what is there now. The arena may be down by that point in time, but the pool, Jimmy Thompson, I'm working with the school board to find out when the old high school will come down. I will be bringing a report to the May subcommittee, sort of with a timeline and a schedule of what's happening in that precinct.
So we won't be looking at any partial demolition during the period of time of the of those games.
We don't necessarily want to have that. We wanted to try and keep the area as clean as possible and as free of any construction. We may, in fact, have the school being constructed at that point in time, and I'm just trying to gather what that'll look like.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'll take the chair back. Any further questions on this? Seeing none, a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Corley. 7.2, this is the Transit Capital Fleet Replacement and Compressed Natural Gas, CNG Station Replacement. Item 7.2 is a presentation respecting the 24 fleet replacement and compressed natural gas. And I have Jerry Davis who wants to make an opening remarks before the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As they set it up, I just wanted to talk about the presentation. What you're going to see is, you have an excellent example of how staff have collaborated together on a great innovation project. We have the transportation, Don's area, Central Fleet, our Energy Initiatives Office, facilities, real estate, legal, procurement, and finance. And I can tell you, for the pillars of corporate culture, it's probably the best example I've seen of collective ownership and courageous change, what you're going to see today. What's happening today, it's not just Public Works Day. It fits in perfectly. It happens to be Earth Day as well. And the many benefits this proposal and the report that Don's going to present could bring, he's going to go over the significance of future Earth Days. And just to give you an example, convert from diesel to CNG, it's 86 kilotons of CO2. And what it means is it's equivalent to 18,000 passenger cars, 2.2 million trees over 10 years, 12,000 homes with electricity for 1 year, 2,000 barrels of oil consumed, and 9.6 million gallons of gasoline. And so there's many benefits to go through. One of the key ones is, and we've been looking at this and we move forward in the budget process, is improvement to the transit services, a new and reliable compressor station at transit working with Union Gas. And then the ability, one of the key things from the Office of the Energy Initiatives from Jeff and Tom is that we can hedge natural gas pricing and for future stability. We can hedge diesel. We're, whatever the market is, we're there. So that's, some of the key benefits of this project. So I'll turn it over to Don. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe actually Jeff Lupton also has some opening comments from Energy. No? Okay, then I can proceed with the presentation.
Not on my roadmap, Don. Nice try, though.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. About a dozen slides here, Mr. Chairman. We have a series of recommendations here. The first is to purchase 60-foot articulated buses versus 40-foot conventional buses for our 2014 purchase, and that is to address continuing pressures predominantly now in the Barton, but also in the King Main corridor as well. And so it's our effort to use available capital monies to purchase articulated buses to address the continuing capacity challenges we have in those corridors in the absence of operating dollars to add more 40-foot buses. We're also recommending, if in the fact committee does support the purchase of 60-foot CNG buses, that they be single source because there is only one Canadian manufacturer. I should make you aware, though, as well, if we are to purchase anything other than 60-foot CNG, if we were to purchase 60-foot articulated diesel, or 40-foot diesel or 40-foot CNG, we would have a competitive market in that there are two current vendors of those configurations of buses. We're also recommending single-source low evacuation excavation shop hoists. We started down the path of replacing some 30 hoists at the MTC that are all beyond their expected life, and we have some experience now with the low excavation shop hoist, and have had good success with that hoist for a number of reasons that are pointed out in the report, and we'd like to continue to replace the old Ford Smith hoists with these hoists. We need a modest amount of facility upgrades at the Mountain Transit Center as a result of a consulting report to review the state of the CNG facilities, and there's a small amount, relatively small amount speaking, and improvements needed at the Mountain Transit Center. And also, we're seeking your authority, if we are to go forward with this, the recommendations contained in this report, to reach agreements with Union Gas for the design, construction, maintenance, and ownership of a CNG station. And we talk about it in the report. Initially, staff was going to report back, and the initial concept was for staff to lead this initiative, but we quickly learned that we don't have the in-house expertise. We also have a long-standing relationship with Union Gas, and that we're recommending inserting Union Gas as a de facto owner-operator of the facility, and there is representation here from the Energy Office as well as Union Gas to speak to any questions that Council might have. We're recommending as well, again, a lot of this hinges on committee support to move forward on CNG, and that we would upgrade the station at the 330 Wentworth Street, and that would provide the dual benefit of emergency backup for the Mountain Transit Center as well. It would allow expansion of CNG pilot into other than transit uses such as waste management, which is a very rapidly growing market in the U.S. I also noticed that our private operator for waste management here runs their entire fleet is running on CNG, and would allow us to, and at the same, again, in keeping with this recommendation, we need to enter in a long-term land lease with Union Gas on the existing footprint at the Mountain Transit Center. I should mention we have a fairly large contingent of staff here today. We have legal services is here, real estate is here, the Energy Office, Central Fleet and Facilities, and then our fleet staff and our planning staff are all here in anticipation that Council would have questions respecting this report. We last reported to Council just a little over a year ago, recommending that we go away and do a business case analysis respecting transit fuel and report back prior to our 2014 fleet replacement purchase. So one of the recommendations today is, in fact, to deal with the 2014 fleet replacement purchase. The reason why we recommended going away and doing a business case analysis, it'll become evident in the presentation, and I suspect from questions coming from committee, but in the last 4 to 5 years, there's been a decoupling of CNG pricing from diesel pricing, where they both used to track at about the same cost. The city is currently purchasing its CNG for the buses at about a 26-cent diesel liter equivalent relative to $1. I think we're paying about $1.09 for diesel. So that's turned the whole business case for CNG upside down, and that's all happened in the last few years, and that gap continues to grow. It's also spurred a very rapid growth in CNG use throughout the United States, and not just in the transit industry. As I mentioned, it's in waste management and winter control, and there's every indication that trend is going to be sustained. So we are recommending a strategy whereby we use available capital budget to mitigate against future operating budgets. And what I mean by this is that we continue to experience pressures in the King-Main corridor, plus the Cannon Street and the Barton corridor, and there are two ways to address that. We could address it through adding more 40-foot buses, which require a bus operator, which require operating budget funding. This allows us to increase capacity using capital budget that comes from the gas tax programs. The second initiative comes from the Energy Office that we've been working in partnership with throughout this exercise, and that we currently have 35 buses left that are CNG, and by replacing CNG with CNG, we'd actually avoid a cost pressure in our 2015 and 2016 budgets in the order of $1.9 million. And then if we continue to purchase CNG, beyond that, we'd be replacing diesel buses with CNG buses, and we'd actually experiencing budget declines in the years 2016 and beyond, totaling some $3.75 million. And this is a cumulative savings in each of those years. As I mentioned as well, it presents an opportunity to pilot the use of CNG beyond transit, such as in waste management fleet. One of the consulting assignments we had was with Marathon Consulting, and our Energy Office can talk to this in greater detail. But the BCA is really based on a $41 million return over a 20-year period. And this is conservative because it counts both the capital that we would be using from the gas tax accounts as well as the operating. So if you count both, it's about a 7-year return. It's a conservative return because our buses are only running 12 years right now. The other is that if you discount the capital is coming from the gas tax programs, our actual payback on the operating budget is in the 3rd year. So we're looking at the other is the possible long-term contract, and Jerry spoke to that in his opening comments, is that we can lock in long-term contracts with CNG where diesel is purchased at the market rate on a monthly basis. And I got a little bit ahead of myself, is that in that we run 12-year bus life, the savings projections are considered conservative. Jerry also mentioned, did most of my presentation, estimated a savings of 86 kilotons of CO2 over 20 years, and that the business case review concluded that CNG is both economically and technically feasible with positive environmental impact. As mentioned already, the net benefits expanding the natural gas fleet include fuel cost savings of up to 50% per kilometre and reduced greenhouse gases that equate to 20 to 25%. The financial implications are $1.808 million, which has already been approved by Council. We're simply seeking authority for single source, so those are an approved capital item. The MTC facility upgrades that I spoke about earlier at $350,000. And the construction of a CNG station at the Mountain Transit Centre, where the upset capital contribution would be $3.6 million. So there's an operating contribution and a capital contribution, and I'm sure Jeff will speak to that. Essentially what it is it sets a ceiling whereby by committing $3.6 million and the $300,000 that we're already spending on operating on the existing station, committee and council will have our assurance that that will be the upset limit, so that the bottom line is there will be no impact on the net levy going forward with respect to the construction and the operations of this facility. And then it would take $300,000 to upgrade the Wentworth Street facility to allow us to pump natural gas at the existing facility at Wentworth Street. We've already, in cooperation with Energy Fleet and Facilities, executed an agreement in principle between the City of Hamilton and Union Gas Limited. And I mentioned as well, there is representation here this morning from Union Gas. The committee would be welcome to put questions directly to the Union Gas folks or representatives here. The next two steps, presuming committee supports the staff recommendations or endorses the staff recommendations, would be to negotiate a contract with Union Gas for the design, construction, maintenance, and ownership of the CNG facility at the Mountain Transit Centre, and to negotiate a long-term land lease for the CNG compressor site at the MTC. That would essentially be to operate on the same site, the same footprint that currently exists at the MTC. So to essentially be a complete tear out of the equipment there, and then a commitment to Union Gas that they would have that land available to them for the 20-year period that we're recommending. So what this report essentially does is recommends a managed incremental migration from diesel fueled transit buses to CNG fueled transit buses. There's been, as Jerry mentioned, very broad consultation. This was a multi-divisional effort to get us to this point that involved the Transportation Division within Public Works, that involved fleet transportation planning operations. The Procurement Office, Financial Services is here today, from the Corporate Services Office, Legal Services is here today to talk to the lease if necessary, and real estate is here as well to talk about the land lease if committee should so wish. In terms of analysis, I've kind of already covered this, and that the 60-foot buses being purchased from capital will allow us to address ongoing overcrowding on routes, and in particular it provides the extra door for boarding personal mobility devices as well, which is a bit of a problem on some of the downtown routes here, in particular the Barton Street route, where the buses only have 2 compartments for persons using personal mobility devices, and when those compartments fill up, it's either we allow people to stand in the aisles, in which case we can't board anyone else, but the added benefit of the articulated buses over and above the additional capacity would be the extra door to allow boarding from 3 doors. So again, we're recommending a managed migration from diesel to CNG fuel buses. We've talked about the 1.9 million if we replace like for like over the next 2 years, 2014 and 2015. And then beyond that, we'll actually achieve budget savings as we change out diesel buses with CNG buses. The upgrading the CNG station on Wentworth Street, I've already mentioned, allows for emergency backup, plus some piloting, perhaps outside of transit. And a really important point in all of this, it's not just about the cost of CNG versus the cost of diesel. It's a quarter of the cost, and we expect that spread to stay there, and Energy Office can speak to that. But as well, everything about the engine the technology is turned upside down. The CNG engines used to be the most difficult and require the highest maintenance, and today that entire equation is turned upside down. Even though the engines are about 86 to 90% the same now, which makes them easier for the maintenance folks to work with, it's the diesel engines to meet environmental emissions regulations need 3 after treatments that the CNG buses don't need. So the diesel engine has now become a problematic engine relative to the CNG engine, in particular as a result of the after treatment that's required to meet the federal regulations that the CNG fuel fleet doesn't need. It already meets those regulations. A savings of 86 kilotons of CO2, our ability to negotiate CNG or NG prices going forward. In the alternative, committee could direct us to purchase 60-foot diesel articulated buses and the alternative to 60-foot CNG fuel buses. That would provide the capacity that we talk about on the routes that are continuing to experience overcrowding, but wouldn't address the savings from the energy savings from purchasing CNG buses. The other is we could simply be directed to continue on with the original plan and purchase 40-foot diesel fuel buses in accordance with our approved 2014 fleet replacement budget. The 2 shortfalls there is we wouldn't achieve the increased capacity that the 60-foot buses will provide, and we will automatically generate a budget pressure of about $950,000 in 2015, another $950,000 in 2016, and then we wouldn't achieve the savings that we forecast CNG will produce over the diesel on a go-forward basis. As Jerry mentioned, perhaps most importantly, this has been a multi-divisional initiative and fits very comfortably into our strategic priority number 2, valued and sustainable services. It certainly meets the financial sustainability criteria and uses processes and services and technology. In this case, technology would be the buses to achieve cost effectiveness and efficiencies across the corporation, and closes with, as Jerry mentioned, an excellent example of demonstrating our corporate pillars, and in particular collective ownership and courageous change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Don. I do have a number of speakers. I'll list them off, and then I'll start with Councillor Ferguson. So we have Councillor Ferguson.
Could I ask, Mr. Chair, that the staff maybe take seats, because I ask you to address these questions directly, if you wouldn't mind moving up to the podium.
Councillor Ferguson, Councillor McCaddy, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Collins. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, my first question is for you, Don. You're asking us to hold our nose and do a lot of things today. You're asking us to buy 18 new buses at $15.5 million, sole sourced. You're asking us to spend $1 million, $1,080 on a new hoist, sole sourced. And it looks like you're also asking us to spend $3.6 million on a new gas compressor station, sole sourced, which we won't own. So that's a lot to ask for. It's $20 million in total you're asking to spend today and not putting it through a competitive process. And you're asking us to go back to a fuel that you wanted to abandon 3 years ago. And that, I suspect, is going to make a lot of us feel pretty uneasy. And, particularly, and during my term on council, I'm in 7.5 years, was when we started to phase out natural gas because natural gas prices were spiking. We've heard in the news recently that natural gas prices are tripling. So probably I should put this question to Jeff. That's just an opening comment to you, Don, that you're asking us to do a lot that's going to give us, I think, some uneasiness here. And through you to Jeff. Jeff, how far out can you hedge natural gas?
Typically, through you, Mr. Chair, typically we hedge out natural gas probably a couple years at most, and monitor the market conditions. Usually we try to do that because we can stay at budget or better. There is the opportunity to probably go out generally as far as 5 years, but you tend to pay a pretty big premium for that.
How far has natural gas spiked in price between December and now?
Natural gas, and I think what you're probably referring to is the press that was out there recently with Enbridge increases about 40%. Is that what's...
I can't recall the vendor. I know there was an application to the Energy Board to spike prices. I thought it was the actual pipelining cost was up to 3 times, but there was a significant spike. Any of us bought natural gas will know what that is. And I know propane prices have doubled in this winter because there's such a shortage of it. And I suspect there's a lot of people doing what Don wants to do, switching over to natural gas, which is going to create a bigger demand, which generally will spike prices. So how much has natural gas gone up in the last 6 months?
So in terms, through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of what you've been hearing in the press the last month or so in terms of the spike of natural gas prices at Enbridge and Union Gas, that's addressed to the residential market and small commercial market. And it's the way that they have to buy gas to service that market. The city buys in a different fashion than that. We are able to buy on a forward basis well in advance of those challenges, so we don't get impacted by the same 30%, 40% that you've seen in the press today. So that doesn't hit us. The only thing that's really hit the natural gas market in the short term was in people trying to balance out their accounts at the end of this year. And primarily that has to do with the amount of gas that was in storage. The impact to us as the city was probably about $300,000 overall. But if we hadn't hedged, it would have been significantly higher. And if we were fully exposed in the market, we would have been about $1.5 million. Longer term, we see natural gas to be fairly steady. Any pressures that we're going to see increases in natural gas is likely going to be reflected in diesel as well. We are seeing that typically we're looking at about a 4-to-1 ratio in the cost of natural gas compared to diesel in the marketplace, and it seems to be the trend that people are moving back towards. It's very common in the U.S. right now for transit fleets and for packer fleets, waste packers. As a matter of fact, GFL, who does the private part, I think Don mentioned, of our natural gas, or of our waste collection, has about 50 packers that have just recently gone to natural gas.
Okay. What were we paying a gigajoule 6 months ago, and what are we paying now? Is that the measurement for natural gas?
We're still paying, on average, we think this year we're still going to be on budget. Right now we're paying about $4.06 a GJ. Over $4 a GJ, which is quite attractive.
And what were we paying last year?
Last year we were paying about $4.13. About 10% higher. And again, that's because we were able to buy on a forward basis. So we bought most of our gas supply last year when the market was favorable, so that we could hedge in and have that budgetability.
Okay, Don was saying during his presentation he's going to give a 7-year payback, is what I saw in the presentation. You're saying you can only take futures out 2 years. How do we know we can get that payback in 7 years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, one thing that just wanted to point out with the 7-year payback and the $41 million net present value, that was based on an earlier study that was done by Marathon that's included in the report. And part of that study assumed that the compressor station was going to be somewhere around $5.7 million. And the reason that we're saying it's conservative is some of the work that we've been doing with our colleagues at Union Gas suggests that likely we'll be looking at somewhere around $3.7 million for a compressor station. So again, Don's numbers are pretty conservative. Any increases that we're likely to see in natural gas over the next few years, I would bet strongly that you're going to see the same pressure in terms of diesel prices as well. So they're probably going to go up in parallel.
I'm not sure I heard the answer of how you're going to get, our finance department is now keeping a scorecard for us on it. They're going to report quarterly on all capital expenditures we made, where in the report they've detailed a payback. and to see, are we really hitting those payback numbers? Are you prepared to put this one on that report and
Absolutely.
all right, so we're taking a bit of a leap of faith here by suggesting a 7-year payback when you can only buy out 2 years. What can you do to get us comfort on that?
I think through you, Mr. Chair, it has to do with the spread on diesel. You've seen, anybody saw this weekend that gas prices went through the roof as well. So the difference between diesel and natural gas is at least we can buy natural gas on a forward basis, so we can watch the market and take advantage of favorable pricing when we can. Yes, natural gas is likely going to tick up over the next few years. Fully expect that. But there's quite a significant supply that's available in natural gas. Diesel, because of the way that the market's structured, we don't have the ability to hedge on a forward basis at or below budget, and we haven't been able to do that for many years. So there's a little bit of comfort at least having that ability to lock in when favorable prices are available for natural gas. Or with diesel, we're open to whatever the rack prices are in the market that particular day.
Okay, I'll give you a break for a second, Jeff, and go back to Don. I can't get comfortable with this because why did we abandon it? Then we come back to it. It just makes you uneasy when you're spending this kind of money. But Don, you say you can't put it through a competitive process to spend $15 million for the buses because there's only one manufacturer with a 60-foot articulating that uses CNG. How do we know we're buying value? How do you benchmark to make sure that the right price we're paying? And is this purchased through Metrolinx where all municipalities are comfortable with the unit price?
Could I ask either Doug Murray or Mark Selkirk to respond? Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I've had a number of discussions with both the OEMs, and currently right now, New Flyer is the only manufacturer of 60-foot CNG-powered articulated buses. Value for dollar, there's contract pricing that's available through us, through Metrolinx, that lets us know what bids have gone out and what bids have been received and what people are paying for their product, and I have access to that spreadsheet. And based on the numbers that I'm hearing from New Flyer on their particular bus right now, we're at or slightly below what the market is paying.
Okay, so we know through a public process what the cost of a diesel bus is. I hear there's 2 suppliers of 60-foot articulating diesel buses. Where we're sole sourcing the natural gas price buses, are they more or less than the diesel ones?
All right, through you, Mr. Chair. There's an incremental cost of $35,000 to $50,000, be it a 40-foot CNG bus or a 60-foot CNG bus. So on a 60-foot CNG bus, the incremental increase is about $50,000.
To go from diesel to natural gas?
That's correct.
Is that because they don't have? Is it truly more? Is that because they don't have any competitors, so they extract what they can from the marketplace, or is it because there is more expense in building a natural gas bus?
Through you, Mr. Chair. On a 40-foot natural gas bus versus a 40-foot diesel bus where we have competitors in the market, the incremental cost is the same between both of those OEMs. So on the 60-foot bus, the incremental cost is somewhat higher because you have to put the technology on first, plus the other technology of moving part of that fuel system to the front half of the bus. So the cost is not just getting that extra $50,000. There's a lot of extra parts that go into that particular vehicle to validate that cost.
And last question for now to you, to Don. You want to sole source $3.6 million to Union Gas, but we don't own it. Is that correct?
Well, what we're proposing to do is use up to a cap of $3.6 million in gas tax reserves towards the design, construction, operation of the CNG facility, the Mountain Transit Center, over a 20-year lease period. And by doing that, we would completely offset so that we'd be an assurance of zero impact on the net levy on the operating budget going forward, respective of operating as CNG for the transit fleet, Mr. Chairman. So that assures council that there'd be no operating budget impact as a result of the staff recommendations to this report.
Jeff, want to come in?
So through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify on the $3.6 million and the whole process that we're working on with Union Gas, they would be our constructor, our maintainer, our supplier of the station. they would go to competitive bids in the marketplace through their process. So there would be a competitive bid process for the compressor stations, as well as they will be doing a competitive bid process for the ongoing annual maintenance of the station. The reason they're doing it is they have much more expertise in dealing with compressor stations. They have them all over the place, and it's a regular thing for them. It also gives us the ability to pay for the cost of the services that are associated with the compressor station through our rate. So essentially, we're changing our delivery point of natural gas to the distribution to the output of the compressor station when we fill the buses.
So Union Gas will put it through a competitive process, share those results with us, and that's what we'll pay? Or do they take the benefit if it's on the public procurement?
It's going to be an open book process.
Who owns the compressor after 20 years?
The way that we have it structured right now, Union Gas would own the compressor stations. At the end of 20 years, they're pretty much done. If the city had a desire where they wanted to own them, it's something we could certainly explore. But most of the value of the compressor station will be much depreciated at the end of that term.
Well, the moving parts may be, but the stationary tanks and whatnot should be fine. I'll just wait to see my other colleagues say. That's all my questions for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McCaddy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Don, for all the research and everybody else up there on this report. Obviously, very thoroughly researched, which is really appreciated by us. Don, just a reflection on other transit properties and where they're going with natural gas. I know in Canada, we've been the leader in the past. We've stepped back a bit over the last 10 or 15 years. Sounds like there's a lot of properties down in the U.S. So if we're stepping back into this big time, are there likely others to follow? Will Metrolinx get fully into this, over the next little while? Just get a sense that we're not entirely on our own here, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chairman, it's a good question, and maybe calling in on Mark to respond on that, because much of the industry, both within transit and outside transit in Canada, is watching Hamilton right now. But Calgary has actually made a commitment to get back into CNG, and York Region has just advised that they will be engaging through a consultation process with a very high level of interest in getting back into CNG. But maybe, Mark, if you could expand on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just met actually last week with the folks from BC Transit who are moving back into CNG once again. They never really left. They were always kind of on the periphery. But they've purchased 25 buses. They've just put those into service in the last month and a half. They have another 25 on order. And they've just basically done what we're doing right now, and they've refreshed their compressor station as well. Through my friends at Metrolinx, I know that York Region is anxiously awaiting for this report to go forward so it can become a public document to hand off to their council to speak to CNG in York Region. I would hazard a guess that Oakville and Mississauga both have contacted me on a number of occasions wondering where we're at and where we're headed in the future. Oakville recently built a new transit garage, and they wanted to make certain that they had enough land available on their property to put a CNG compressor station. And Mississauga Transit will be putting together a new facility over the next 2.5 years. And again, they want to ensure that they have space on their property for a CNG station as well. So we were the leader in the beginning, and it sounds like we're leading the charge one more time.
Great, good to hear. And just following on Councillor Ferguson's questions about the price of natural gas, Jeff, I'd heard the same things, that it had gone up. So just so I can understand that answer, Mr. Chair, through you to Jeff. So Jeff, you're saying that the price increases were for home natural gas, not vehicle natural gas, and that you were confident that it would stay where we want it to stay to make this whole thing work. What we have before us today over the next 10 years or that sort of a time frame.
Through you, Mr. Chair. For reference after this meeting, there was an information update that we sent out to Council about 2 weeks ago that dealt with the whole aspect of what that price increase was and how it affects the city or doesn't affect the city. So again, it's the way that the distribution companies have to buy gas to supply those markets for the residential and small commercial. Because we're a large user or a large customer, we're able to enter into our own direct purchase agreements, which gives us the ability to hedge, and we don't get impacted on those short-term increases. So over the future, will natural gas increase? Probably, very likely so. But I think the ratio that it's going to increase with diesel is going to be very similar. So we're still going to have that gap in between the pricing of natural gas and diesel for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Jeff. And Mr. Chair, again, just ask the question. I think I know the answer, but the lease with Union Gas, is that coming back to us then for the compressor station? We're heading in that direction, but are we actually going to see the terms of the lease in the weeks ahead? Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the way that we would work that would be very similar to any natural gas rate contract that we got into. This would be part of what we call a T1 account. It would be similar to the process that we went through with the biogas plant up at Water and Wastewater. So what we would do is we would negotiate the terms of that lease with legal at the table, with finance at the table. I wouldn't intend on coming back to council to share that. Essentially, the key part is that it's going to go through a competitive bid process. We will go through the details in terms of lining up in terms of what our costs will be through that rate. The contribution that Don makes through capital contribution, that just offsets our monthly operating cost that's applied to that rate.
I think the last question I have, Mr. Chair, over to you, Don. I think recommendation F, this is E. I guess the natural gas station, and the suggested source of funds is the provincial gas tax reserve. You and I have had long conversations about the provincial gas tax reserve, and my understanding, and I'm always confused on this, so please clarify for me perhaps yet again, but I had thought that the provincial gas tax was the only source we had for operating dollars to, for example, to expand transit on the street, as we did previously with this source of funds. But this again is identifying that source of funds for capital. And I had hoped that if there were any opportunities for the provincial gas tax funds to still be alive, that is, we haven't spent them all, allocated the 9 or 10 million or whatever we get per year, that we would shift all our capital expenditures to the federal gas tax, because the federal gas tax we can only spend on capital. We don't have an opportunity to spend it on operating. We're always short of operating dollars because it hits the levy if we're not, which it did this year for transit expansion, transit service level expansion. So just a clarity once again, and through you, Don, as to why we're using a source of operating funds that can be used for operating funds or capital, but it's our only operating source for transit service.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I refer you to the financing table on page 6 of the report. Is the lion's share of the funding would actually come from the federal gas tax that committee has set aside from the federal gas tax transfer. So you can see the funding source for the program, the transit fleet replacement program, is predominantly through about $4 million a year in contribution to reserve through our operating budget. The $450,000 that we've been adding to the operating budget every year to increase your contribution to reserve to offset the loss of the OBRP program. Then you can see the $3.7 million from federal gas tax. So the two primary funders are the ongoing contribution to the operating budget of about 4.4 million or 4.5 million, 4.6 million, and about 3.7 million from federal gas taxes, where would be the funding sources for the fleet replacement program and the additional costs being recommended in this report, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Don, maybe it's a typo then in recommendation E, because it says this is the compressed natural gas station it's talked about in item E, and it says $3.6 million, not to exceed $3.6 million, to be funded from the Transit Provincial Gas Tax Reserve. Provincial Gas Tax Reserve. Is that a typo? Should that read Federal Gas Tax Reserve?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking for that. Could you give me some help with that, please, Councillor?
Recommendation E.
Okay.
In the recommendations, yeah, page 2, and it's talked about a couple times, but it's on page 2.
Yeah, I actually misspoke, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for that correction. So, yes, the capital portion would come from the Transit Provincial Gas Tax Reserve. I'm looking at Brian, hoping that he's going to bail me out here. And he's nodding his head yes. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Don, I guess back to my original question then. The Provincial Gas Tax Reserve is our only source of operating dollars from the province for transit.
Yep.
And yet we're using it here again for capital, where we have lots of other sources for capital, or many more sources than we have for operating anyways. It's always a challenge to find dollars no matter what you do. So why would we be using a provincial gas tax reserve instead of the, which is the only one we can use for operating?
If I could, and Mr. Chairman, is the, as you mentioned, the approximately $11 million we receive annually in provincial gas tax is fully committed into the operating budget right now. However, because we have the funds allocated but not fully implemented, there are still 2 initiatives still on the books: the Aberdeen Lock York route implementation and the Stone Church implementation. We've been accumulating interest in that reserve, so the interest that we've accumulated in that reserve can be used towards this project. It can only be used for capital, and the staff recommendation is that it be used for this initiative. It has absolutely no impact with respect to committees and council's commitment of the annual amount that comes in from the province towards funding approved service enhancements. It's because we're still in the implementation stage. We're accumulating some reserve, and it allows us to use this reserve on a one-time basis, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so that's the answer, and I understand that now. So that's the one-time piece that's been accumulating, and if we were to spend it on operating, it's 3.6 one time, and you can't spend one time on operating. So
that's correct, Mr.
hence
Chairman.
The use for capital. Understood.
Correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I have Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Don, lots of information here today. Thank you very, very much, Don. This is the kind of thing, I think, as one member of this committee, Jerry, that I had asked coming back to do a visual presentation, because this is for a layman like me to try to grasp around diesel versus hybrid versus CNG. It's very difficult and can be from time to time all the information confusing, and the roller coaster ride of fuel prices and that. So Don, thank you very, very much for this presentation, and to your team as well that's here today. And I guess Union Gas reps, I take it, are here as well. Oh, there they are. Okay, thank you. So Don, just picking up on the Union Gas construction and the $3.6 million, Mr. Chairman, we're contributing $3.6 million potentially. They will go out and find a way to build it, and they'll own it. Are they contributing any dollars, Mr. Chairman, towards this facility? Through you to Don or whoever.
Thank you,
Don.
Mr. Chairman, but Jeff is best equipped to answer that question.
Are they contributing any money towards this?
No, through you, Mr. Chair. They're going to the money that they make is through the additional gas sales. So the additional gas that flows through the distribution system. So just to clarify, is there anything else? I got it right.
So we spend the 3.6 mil, give the money to Union Gas, they'll build it, they own it, and they don't contribute anything towards it, Mr. Chairman.
They will own it, they will maintain it.
Yep.
Which is very important for us. We've had a lot of challenges the last few years maintaining the existing compressor stations. So they will own it, construct, build, own, maintain, and any further capital that's required for that station, we will pay a maintenance fee similar to what we do with say, our cogen plants at Hamilton Renewable Power. And then any major capital that comes from that will be theirs to deal with.
And in the alternative of contributing this one-time capital contribution, then it would all flow through operating to the operating budget as an operating budget expense. So again, what we're really trying to do here is leverage available capital dollars to help us mitigate and in fact reduce the operating budget in 2016 and beyond through available capital. And the alternative, it would flow to the operating budget either to fund the CNG station if we went forward, or to replace existing CNG fleet with diesel fleet, which has a factor of 4 in terms of operating cost. And then as we got beyond these 35 buses, if we continued to purchase diesel replacements with diesel, then we wouldn't achieve the budgeted savings in 2016 and beyond, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Don. So to be clear, if you have the authority right now, Don, to go ahead and purchase 18 40-foot diesel buses. Mr. Chairman, through you to Don, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, at a value of about $8.7 million, something in that order of magnitude.
And you want us to, Don, in your recommendation today under Report 8.1, Section A, you want us to potentially spend twice that amount on the same number of 18 buses, but they'd be CNG and 60-foot.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. What we're seeking today is really your approval on 2 initiatives. One is to upgrade the 40-foot purchase to 60-foot purchase, which could be diesel or could be CNG. If they're CNG, they're sole source because there's only one provider. If they're diesel, then we don't achieve the budget savings that we would achieve in CNG over diesel. And that decision is a fleet replacement decision that we're asking you to consider as a means of using capital to address ongoing loading and overcrowding problems that we have on the both the Barton and still again on the King Main route. So if you maybe think of this, Mr. Chairman, as 2 initiatives. One is to use capital to buy 60-foot instead of 40-foot, which will address the overcrowding issue. The second initiative is to purchase CNG versus diesel, which will mitigate which will mitigate certain budget pressures in 2015 in the order of $980,000 in 2015, $980,000 in 2016, and then budget reductions in 2016 and beyond. So our recommendation with respect to the $3.6 million is the return on that will be the fuel savings in beginning in 2015 and beyond, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to use capital to offset budget pressures in 2015 and 2016 in the order of $1 million a year, and then 2017 and beyond actually achieve savings should the spread between CNG and diesel continue. So it's 2 projects roll into one. One is an energy project, the other is a fleet project, and the concept with the fleet project is to use larger buses rather than adding more 40-foot buses, because if we add more 40-foot buses, the cost of the bus operator is felt in the operating budget. So this is a way to create capacity on these high volume routes that we continue to struggle with overcrowding on, by using capital rather than coming to asking you from our operating budget to put more 40-foot buses on the road, each of which requires an additional bus operator, so it almost all falls on the operating budget.
So, Don, in recommendation A, to compare apples to apples, what would 18 60-foot diesel buses cost be? Do we have that number?
I'll get Mark to answer, but I think he said it's about $40,000 or $50,000 over the 12-year life of a bus. 60-foot diesel versus 60-foot CNG, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we're looking at the cost between a 60-foot CNG bus versus a 60-foot diesel bus?
Yep. So, Mark, yes, in recommendation A, I just want to compare apples to apples. You say council could buy 18 60-foot articulated buses, CNG, at 15.5 mil to the currently approved 18 40-foot diesel buses at 8.7 mil. I want that 18 60-foot diesel buses number, what that cost would be, so I can compare it to the 15.5 mil. Mr. Chairman, through you, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. roughly $50,000 is the incremental upcharge for a CNG bus over a diesel bus on a 60-foot length. So you would have 18 by roughly $50,000.
And so that
$900,000.
That math is about what then? About 900,000 more?
Over 12 years?
So I would add 900,000 to the 8.7 million and report it in recommendation A? Okay. So folks, help me here. Recommendation A talks about 18 buses, 60-foot articulated, 18 buses, 40-foot. 18 60-foot is 15.5 mil. I take it that's the CNG. Correct?
Correct. So if we were to purchase diesel,
So
you
hold
could
it,
take
Don. Hold
900,000.
Don, please. Hang on, Don, please. You're the encyclopedia on public transit. I got a long way to go to catch up to you. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, Mark, if I wanted to substitute the 40-foot diesel buses and make those 60-foot, what does the 8.765 million number become, please, Mr. Chairman, through you to Mark? Do I add 900,000 to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That number would become about 14.6 million. Go from 40-foot diesel buses to 60-foot diesel buses. Is that the number we're looking for?
14.6 million?
Correct.
So it'd be within about $1 million of the CNG purchase?
That's correct. Through you, Mr. Chair.
To purchase, just for clarity, to purchase 60-foot CNG buses is 15.5 million. As Mark pointed out, it's about, how much a bus, Mark?
Mr. Chair, about $50,000.
50,000 times 18, which is about 900,000. So to purchase 60-foot diesel buses, you'd take $900,000 off the 15.5 million.
That's how I get the 14.6 million. Okay,
Right.
so that's comparing now apples to apples, correct? Because you sounds like, Don, it sounds like you're professional, Mr. Chairman, through you. I appreciate your indulgence on this, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to get some answers here so I can clearly understand, so it helps my vote at the end of this. Chairman, through you to Don. Don, it sounds like your professional recommendation, even though you had prior approval to buy the 40-foot diesel buses, but you've kind of put a halt to that. You've come here today saying, folks, I'd rather you give me the permission to buy 60-foot diesel or 60-foot CNG. Can I get that clarified, Mr. Chairman, through you to Don?
Correct. We could even purchase, Mr. Chairman, if it's committee's wish not to purchase 60-foot. We could purchase 40-foot in either CNG or diesel, and that would be a competitive market because there are two vendors. What it wouldn't do is address the overcrowding situation on the Barton and the Barton route and the McMaster to Eastgate routes. So what we're suggesting is we spend roughly $8 million from the capital reserve to address the overcrowding situation on the basis that if you look at the chart on page, this would be a one-time, that would cap us out in terms of articulated buses. And we're only recommending that because we see that as being sustainable over the 10 years. So we don't want it to threaten this decision to threaten sustainability of our capital replacement account, but we do have an opportunity here to address continued overcrowding through a one-time expenditure on 60-foot buses for 2014. However, there's no financial savings if you were to direct us to purchase 40-foot in either CNG or diesel. What we had achieved in the staff recommendation to buy the 60-foot is to purely address the overcrowding. So we could reduce this number down to about the 8.7 million thereabouts, whether we purchase CNG 40-foot or diesel 40-foot, but the investment between the 8.7 million and the 15.5 million is only a way for us to use capital to leverage ongoing overcrowding. So if overcrowding is a non-issue, then you could direct us to buy 40-foot in either CNG or diesel.
Okay, Don, and I want to address overcrowding. I mean, it's great that we've got tremendous amount of additional public transit usage increasing, especially on these overcrowded routes. I want to address that. So, Don, if you had gone ahead without coming back today and gone ahead with your pre-approval to buy 18 40-foot diesel buses, you mean to tell me you couldn't have put some of those additional 18 buses on the overcrowded routes to have more buses more running times, additional fleet on those routes, Mr. Chairman? You need 60-footers, otherwise you can't address the overcrowding. Through you to Don, I need that clarified, please.
Well, the only way to address the overcrowding, the only alternative to address the overcrowding is to put more 40-footers on. And every time we put a 40-footer on, we have to pay for another bus operator. All of the bus operator costs come from the operating budget. So because we have a sustainable capital program, we can use capital to address the overcrowding as opposed to coming back and asking you for additional operating budget to put additional operators out there on additional 40-foot buses. So the recommendation is essentially to use provincial and federal funds to help us with our overcrowding situation, as opposed to coming back to you and saying we need additional operating budget funds through additional operators and additional 40-foot buses to address the problem. So we're using capital that we have in a sustainable reserve to address an issue that otherwise we would have to address through the operating budget.
So, Don, to buy 18 60-foot CNG articulated buses, you don't need any more drivers. Is that what I've heard, Mr.
That's
Chairman?
correct, Mr. Chairman. That's
you
correct.
Don't need any more drivers.
That's correct. It doesn't change the fleet complement. It changes the makeup of 40 to 60.
I do have Jerry that's piped in.
Yeah, please, General Manager.
So through the chair, it's a one-for-one. So you just asked the right question about the drivers. I wanted to point that out. So thank you.
What did I ask, Jerry?
Going to the 60-foot, you don't need to address additional drivers to address the increased service level.
But I just, thank you, Jerry. Thank you for telling me I asked a decent question. But if I give Don the 18 60-foot diesel buses, he does either way with 60-footers. He doesn't have to have extra bus operators.
Correct. They're a one-for-one exchange.
Correct. Okay. Don, just a couple more quick questions here. Don, I'll read you back your historical statement. And you know, Don, you and I have chatted about this publicly and privately. The City commissioned construction of a natural gas fueling station at the Mountain Transit Center in 84 and at Winter Street in 90. Transit continued to purchase CNGs until 2003, reaching a peak fleet of 173. However, cost and quality concerns drove a decision to transit out of CNG via the annual transit bus replacement cycle, whereby diesel and hybrid replaced CNG. As of this year, there are only 35 CNGs left from the peak of 173. 10 years ago, Don, you said, let's get out of the CNG business. Now you want back in it. Mr. Chairman, through you to Don, just for a succinct comment again, because, Don, this roller coaster of fuel, hedging, Jeff, I'm sorry, stock markets and that, I'm not into that, and the hedging stuff just scares me, it causes nervousness. No guarantees, 7-year payback. So you wanted out of the business, and now today you're saying, hey, folks, I'd like back in.
Couldn't be more correct, Mr. Chairman. I've advocated getting out of CNG now for almost a decade, probably well back before the year 2000, and as about 2009, 10, couple things very significantly started to happen. CNG pricing and diesel pricing were almost identical. Today, CNG is 1/4 the price of diesel, and that spread is expected to stay or grow, according to Jeff. That's what most of the U.S. is banking on as the CNG market grows very rapidly in the U.S., and not only among transit fleet, but among non-transit fleets such as waste management. What this is about is, Mr. Chairman, I'll be very honest with you, the easy out for staff here would be to continue on purchasing 40-foot diesel buses because it's a no-risk scenario. What it doesn't do, though, is address the budget pressures that we'll have of about $1 million in 2015, another $1 million in 2016, and then not achieve budget savings in 2016 and beyond. So we see this as a very low-risk venture here, in that through a $3.6 million upset investment in capital coming from federal gas tax, we will that will pay benefits of $1 million in each of the 2 years, cumulative over the next 2 years in the operating budget. So the point here is that we need to adapt, and the market around has changed, and the easy out would be to not endorse the staff recommendations here. We'd continue on with the overcrowding, and we would have $1 million budget pressures, $1 million in 2015 and $1 million in 2016. That would be very significant pressures on the transit operating budget, and we would miss the opportunity to then perhaps pilot natural gas elsewhere in the city. So this is not a no-risk situation, but it is a low-risk situation in that we're using federal gas tax to offset future operating budgets at the local level here. The other thing it's doing is buying us a bit of an insurance policy in that we'll have dual fuel, that we'll be able to operate on either CNG or diesel. So as the market goes, we'll be able to adjust accordingly. So we see this as a fairly low-risk venture with a fairly high return, at least in terms of the annual operating budget. And it is a change in direction. There's absolutely no question about that, but two things cause that change. Is the decoupling of the CNG fuel price from the diesel fuel price about 4 to 5 years ago from roughly equal in the diesel liter equivalent to 4-to-1 ratio now, and the dramatic changes in the emissions regulations for engines in that we have 3 after treatments on the diesel engines right now, and those after treatments are adding 3 cents a liter to the price of fuel, and we're only just coming up. We barely had some of this fleet 4 or 5 years now, and the cost of replacing some of this equipment is about $4,000 a bus. So the entire pricing market has changed very dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years, and the engine technology has changed very dramatically, where the CNG was a very unreliable engine, had high maintenance costs, to one that's now almost identical in terms of parts, but doesn't require any of the after treatment that is adding 3 cents a liter to the cost of to the diesel fuel to maintain these buses. So it's a question of adapting to the changing environment around us, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. My last summary comment, Mr. Chairman. Don, the current transit center at 2200 Upper James, can that accommodate 60-foot, 18 more 60-foot articulated buses? Forget the diesel CNG. Can the current transit center accommodate that?
It can, but it will force more buses into outside storage, but we do have the room in outside storage. When we report back on the Rapid Ready report, it's absolutely inevitable as our fleet grows and our service grows, we are going to have to move back into a second facility. The most likely candidate would be 330 Wentworth Street. But to answer your question, yes, the existing fleet at the Mountain Transit Center has the capacity, but it's a fair question that it will push more buses into outside storage.
And if we only go ahead with the diesel, 60-foot diesel, Mr. Chairman, 18 of them, I'll save $3.6 million on not needing a compressed natural gas station that Union Gas will build that they won't contribute anything towards. Mr. Chairman, through you to Don? Or do I still got to build that station even if I only buy diesel?
No, if you only buy diesel, we'll wean off the remaining 35 CNG buses over the next 2 years. Could I just ask you, please, Councillor, again for that question?
Sure. If we only, Mr. Chairman, just give you approval for 18 60-foot diesel buses adding to your fleet, I saved the $3.6 million of building the compressed natural gas station?
Yes, that's correct. However, you will face a $980,000 increased cost in the operating budget for increased cost of fuel in 2015, and we'll encounter an additional $980,000 roughly in increased operating budget in 2016 because we'll be replacing CNG buses with diesel buses.
Okay, thanks so much, Don. Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I have Councillor Collins, Powers, Duval.
Don, very quickly, and many of my questions have been asked by previous speakers, so I, like Councillor Jackson, for those of us who've been around, very fascinated certainly with the on-again, off-again love affair that transit providers have had with CNG. Is this it for diesel, or will we see a similar recommendation that we witnessed a couple of years ago? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but it seems like with the price discrepancy that you've outlined, and I'm assuming others, as you've noted, in other jurisdictions will be following in our footsteps, is this it for diesel? Is this basically CNG will be it, and this debate, the beta versus VHS, is now done with, and we know which one wins out?
I honestly can't say, Mr. Chairman. What I can say with certainty is that if we go forward with the staff recommendation today, we will cost avoid $980,000 in 2015. We'll cost avoid an additional $980,000 in 2016. Beyond that, I think based on the growth in the United States, in not only the transit fleets but the non-transit fleets, there's an expectation, at least in the United States, that it's going to be very favorable It's going to be a very favorable CNG market, but beyond the next 2 years, I'm not in the pricing game. We're asking council, as Councillor Ferguson pointed out, to make a very difficult decision today. However, we do view it as a fairly low risk, high return, but there are no guarantees. There are absolutely no guarantees. We're simply trying to adapt to the environment around us, and frankly, my best information I can give you is the next 2 years.
Right, and that's completely understandable. And as was, I think, alluded to earlier, these large purchases always come with some level of financial indigestion. And I guess the question that I would have is that, is there a way for us to monitor both streams? And so we've had some scenarios that have been sort of spelled out that if we wanted to go with an alternative, what's the cost from a capital perspective? How will our operating budgets trend over the next couple of years? You certainly have a handle, at least as you just mentioned, on the next maybe 2 budget cycles. Is there a way for us, after this decision is made then, to track the what happens on the diesel side of the equation, knowing that from past history, that someone will be in front of a future council again with this CNG diesel debate? It'd be great to have that sort of that historical trending on both sides, where you could track from this day forward, or the date that the decision's made, in terms of what happened with diesel after council decided to go with, if we do, the CNG purchases, what happened on the operating side, what would have happened on the capital side. And I think we're probably better prepared, or someone's better prepared in the future around this table, to make a decision in terms of where we go with this debate and with future purchases, because this isn't this is probably one of the biggest purchases we'll make, certainly in the transit area over the next decade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We absolutely track every bus expenditure virtually to the penny, and we could report in any way, shape, or form that committee wishes to direct us in terms of, we could provide a historical in terms of the hybrid versus the CNG versus diesel, 60-foot, 40-foot, and we happen to have, interestingly enough, a CNG and diesel fleet that's fairly close together, and we've got a remarkably good data management system, so we are absolutely comfortable committing to council either to report back in terms of historical costing, or to report at some point in the future in terms of actual experience. We have a very, very good, solid, reliable database. We could report back in almost any form you directed us, Mr. Chairman.
And I think that'd be a useful exercise, Don, just knowing where we've been over the last decade. And Councillor Jackson pointed it out. I mean, there was a time where the report that we see today was completely different. In fact, it's the complete opposite of what's in front of us. And so the trending and the tracking of what's to happen in the future wouldn't be for the purposes of proving anyone wrong. It's essentially to provide us with more information in the future when this type of recommendation is in front of us again. We know we're going to have to replace buses at some point in time, and we know that there'll be a decision to make in terms of what kind of fuel that we're using. So I think it'd be a useful exercise to go through.
I think it'd be absolutely prudent, Mr. Chairman. In fact, it might be prudent to take it one step further and recommend an internal audit come back with a report down the road. We want to be completely open and completely transparent in our reporting, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's absolutely prudent, given the order of magnitude here, and we're happy to take whatever direction you want to provide.
That would be a value for money audit, not internal audit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks, and I just want to thank you, Don, because you've always given us the recommendations that seek to provide, responsible transit service that's the most environmentally friendly service we can provide, but at the same time understanding that there are some fiscal constraints. It seems like today that, at least on the surface and with your presentation, that from a financial perspective, although this is quite costly, that there's a great element of cost avoidance and at least benefits over the medium and long term on the operating budget, which is very important. So those are the questions I have, Mr. Chairman, and certainly like to listen to what others have to say.
Thank you. I have Councillor Powers, Councillor Vella, myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Don, I serve on the Canadian Urban Transit Association, and I chair one of their major committees, which is made up of municipal council representatives. So the committee is made up of a composition of not only large operators, but small operators. I think we made the right decision to postpone purchases a number of years ago, just to see how the evolution of the CNG has been playing out.
Are you providing comments or questions for the presenter? Because I have Councilor McCaddy on for comments.
Allow me to set the stage, and then I definitely have questions.
Okay.
Okay. So over the last number of years, the reason we made the decision to set it aside because of the evolution of the CNG and that, not too many years ago, it was a costly proposition that caused more problems than it was worth from an operational standpoint. And that's taken, and that has changed. What I'm seeing in the comments from my colleagues on the particular committee is you're going to see the large operators who not only have ready access to abundant amounts of natural gas, probably evolving towards CNG. My colleagues in Ottawa, that's something that they're talking about. So a lot of the larger players are ones that will go there. The days of the diesel buses is not going to happen. Probably the technology and the mechanical operations has probably peaked. There's probably minor tweaking that's there, but the smaller operators or the ones that kind of have the outreach that takes them beyond the long runs will continue to operate under the diesel. So both have a place. So I think it was a wise decision that this council made in order to get us to this point where it's a costly expenditure that we need to make, but we need to make it wisely in the fact that Don and everyone has laid out. So my question is, I'm going to E, and I'm going to talk about, once again, the Union gas compressor. I've got a real hard time spending $3.6 million on a facility which we would need in order to fuel our vehicles should we go to the compressed natural gas, and Union Gas has ownership of this particular. I mean, why don't we spend the $3.6 million and we own it? I mean, it sounds like they're not putting a bloody cent into the thing. So I need some convincing. Otherwise, I'm off on side this thing. I'm not going to, why? Anyway, perhaps, maybe there's something that I've missed in the discussions.
I asked the same question, Mr. Chairman. So, Jeff, if you...
Mr. Chair, if it pleases the committee, could we have Union Gas comment on that?
Well, I'd love to hear that, please. I'd love to hear that they're matching the funds or something like that.
Hi, Council. You have the microphone.
I'm thinking I'm going to send this thing back so we can sort it out, but I'd like to hear a conversation to start it.
I'm glad you asked the question, Councillor Powers, because that's certainly one of the ones I was going to pursue.
Good morning, Council. I'm very happy to be here, privileged to be able to speak in front of you. My name is Steve Kay. I am the Manager of Distribution Business Development for Union Gas out of our Chatham office. I'm very happy to have been able to work with Jeff and his team on this proposal. In terms of the question relating to the capital, hopefully I can clarify here. We've done a number of financial scenarios, and one thing I'd like to mention too is that these are at the feasibility level. So our next step would be to work with Jeff to further refine our cost estimates. But the initial work that we've done with Jeff and his team is on a $3.6 million station cost. The city would contribute $2.6 million of capital towards that project if a 20-year term were taken. So effectively, Union Gas, if you will, is funding $1 million worth of that capital cost. So we've done a number of different scenarios. Those will all get further refined with Jeff and his team as we go forward. And it varies by the term that's taken. We've thus far in the presentation been talking about a 20-year term. There will be and can be a contribution from Union Gas towards the cost of the station.
Okay. Okay, could I think there's probably time to have Jeff come back and ask why what is being articulated by Union Gas is not reflected in the report.
Yeah, if I could clarify, the total cost of the station is $3.6 million. Total capital cost of the station.
Could I ask just a couple more questions to the gentleman before he leaves? So, give me clarity, please. There's two conflicting lines in the particular report. I think it's called legal implications, the slide. You want to pull it up, Don? It wasn't meant to be there towards the end. Yes. Okay. So, through you, Mr. Chair, to Steve. So, give me some understanding. So, on the second bullet, the words say design, construction, maintenance, and ownership of the CNG. And then the next line is negotiate a long-term land lease for the CNG. So my question is, will you own the station? Or will we own the station and you will lease the lands to construct it and operate it on those leased lands? So I need some clarity, and perhaps Don needs to give some clarity on it too.
Yeah, so the current proposal is that we would lease the land from the city, which is largely the existing footprint that the existing station currently occupies, and we would design, build, and own the station on that footprint with land leased from the city.
Why would you own it?
We've been asked to operate the station, to own and maintain the station by the city for our expertise in the operation of compressor stations.
Okay, so I won't go any further. I mean, this is definitely going back. It's creating more problems and clarities, and I'm glad I asked the question because there was a kind of $1 million there that came out that wasn't there. So we'll kind of leave it at that. I guess my final one on this is, if the facility, if the decision made by committee and ultimately council is to go to CNG fuel vehicles, therefore there is a need for that major fueling station up at the main transit station and a supplementary one down at 333. Will that station only provide fueling for HSR and or garbage vehicles, or because you own it, will other vehicles be able to come in and fuel it on a buyback basis from Union Gas? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair. What we talked about doing with this is, first step, figure out how to deal with what the city's need in terms of the buses. We talked about in the future if it made sense to look at fueling, say, Union Gas vehicles or other vehicles at this site, and that would have to make sense from a financial standpoint and a security standpoint, not impacting the transit operation. It's something we could certainly look at. But we took that and parked that discussion for another day.
I think that other day is happening right now, because I think we're sending it back, and I think we're going to need the complete story as to what the reason and what the use and what the evolving use of the facility. And I think we need to hear that complete story. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. Just kind of into my segues, and I have a last question is I have no problems with what Mr. Hull is suggesting here. The evolution and I've been at the community meetings and discussed with the manufacturers the ever-evolving CNG to where the point now where it is becoming a vehicle of choice for a lot of the operators, and as indicated is a lot of the major players out of the United States and some in Canada are evolving in that direction. So what Don's suggesting and the reality is that commercial cost of natural gas is much more stable. It makes all kinds of sense to buy into that, I'm going to call it, more affordable fuel source. volatile prices that we're paying for diesel. My last question, and it's probably more rhetorical, but I'll ask it. So if council was to make the decision to move away from LRT and to move towards a BRT system, would the vehicles that you're suggesting here have a place within an expanded and much more practical and usable BRT?
Yes, they would. In the lifespan of these vehicles, they would. They only have the right side doors. In a full BRT, you'd have doors on left side and right side, so that in a full BRT with dedicated transit lane, you'd have center loading and unloading. So that part of a full BRT would take several years to develop. It would require dedicated lane, the construction of center island. So in the interim, the alternative vehicle throughout the industry is the 60-foot with the right side doors only, servicing the curb lane.
I guess to supplemental that one, and these vehicles would be not lost to use.
Correct.
A fully developed BRT system.
Correct.
Thank you. That's my questions.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Don. I know you've been up there for a while, but going back to recommendation A, just picking up on some other councillors' questions, and you had mentioned that if we went to the 60-foot buses, that we could, that would help with our overcrowding, some of the problems that we're having. So I picked up on that, and if we were to stay with the 40-foot buses, what would the cost be to put extra buses on there to avoid the overcrowd, to fix it? The maintenance costs and the operating costs for such as extra drivers. Have we done a cost comparison to that?
A peak period bus roughly runs about $350,000 a year in operating costs all in. An off-peak bus costs roughly $600,000 to $650,000, or a full-service bus roughly $600,000 to $650,000 a year. So presuming you'd start with adding peak period buses to address the overcrowding, about $350,000 in increased operating costs for every bus.
For every bus, and have we done an estimate of how many buses we would need to?
I don't have it here with me today, but it's something we could provide. We certainly see that replacing 18 40-foots with 18 60-foots will be money well spent. That, I think, would be the cap in terms of our 60-foot fleet. If we look across North America, we track the use of small buses, 40-foot buses and 60-foot buses, and what each municipality uses. That would place us near the higher end in terms of our ratio of 60-foot buses to all other fleet. So we would see that these 18 are needed, and they would be useful and productive, but would probably, proportionally speaking, being the last recommendation of articulated bus that we'd bring before you in the foreseeable future. Okay, and that information would be useful because you've shown some good savings in there if we went to that way, but $6 million to $7 million is a huge, so I want to see what else it can fix, and especially with the operating. The other thing is, have we taken consideration if we went to 40-foot to 60-foot buses, our bus stops? I know some of the stops that we've had 40-foot buses, we've had no problem, by history. But when we increased it to 60-foot, the stop locations are now blocking people's driveways, making it an inconvenience where people are stopping there. So would it be an additional cost to make to those bus stops? We've done the analysis on the routes that we'd be operating the 60-foot buses on, and with rare exception, every bus stop is capable of handling 60-foot as we speak, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I thank you.
Ask Councillor Pursuit to take the chair. Let me understand this then. $3.6 million for the gas compression station. $900,000 for the purchase of the differential between the CNG and the diesel, coming up to $4.5 million. Now, if I extrapolate a cost-benefit analysis, you had indicated that the fuel consumption differential with the diesel fleet I think I heard $900,000 a year. Is that correct?
Yes, it's because of the in-year purchase. By the time the 35 buses were fully replaced, the analysis that Mark and our finance folks have run is on a fully annualized basis, I think I say 1.9 million in here. Yes. So by the time on an annualized basis, once the 35 40-foot CNG buses are out and replaced with 35 CNG buses, on an annualized basis from that point in time, from the day they go into service for 2 years forward, the impact is 1.9 million. So we're in year right now.
Okay, help me understand this, because the numbers aren't jiving now.
Okay, so
I was told, when I was listening very carefully, answering Councillor Jackson's questions, that the additional fuel cost between the NAG or CNG buses versus the diesel, the 18, if we just went diesel versus CNG, the differential in cost in regards to gas would be about $900,000 annually.
That's correct. So if we got approval today, it doesn't sound as if we are, for our 2014 bus purchase in particular, those buses, we may not get those buses this year because of the lead time. So let's say we got those buses, for the sake of argument, January 1, 2015. We will have an annualized impact in 2015, and they went into service day one, and they were CNG and not diesel. We'd have an annualized budget impact, operating budget impact for 2015, if we started them into service January 1, 2015, of about we estimate about $980,000.
So could so the payback for that, and you said you can't forecast beyond 2 years, right, in regards to fuel?
I guess
diesel.
That's a question that Energy Office can answer. What I'm saying is I'm comfortable that for at least the next 2 budget years, probably the next 3 budget years, we feel very comfortable committing to these operating budget implications.
So on these assumptions, because that's what they're assumptions. We got what is an assumption is a $900,000 saving tomorrow, because we know what this year's costs are or next year's costs are. So all things being equal, we could forecast certainly a year ahead, perhaps maybe even 2 years ahead at that $900,000 cost differential. I guess my concern is 5 years. So we're looking at a $4.5 million investment. And $4.5 million, that we wouldn't be any further ahead in 5 years.
I'm not sure where the $4.5 million is coming from, but
$900,000 differential, so $50,000 per bus.
Okay.
Between the diesel and the CNG.
Okay.
So that's your $900,000 plus the $3.6 million for the compression, the station. So if you add that up, that's $4.5 million.
Okay.
So if I divide 4.5 by $900,000, I get around 5 years, correct?
Jeff?
That's correct, Councillor.
So the question is, do we forecast or the payback in those 5 years?
Well, I think the payback will be personally less than 5 years if you discount the capital. If you only impact the operating budget, the payback is closer to 3 years. I think, and Councillor Collins raised a good question here, in that what it does is it provides flexibility to go CNG or diesel. So if the market takes another flip, something that no one could have forecasted anywhere in North America, we're not absolutely locked into CNG. What this allows us to do is to adapt. So if something changes in the fuel supply market or the fuel price market, it allows us to adapt, because we as a municipality will be ahead of most other municipalities in Canada in that we'd be able to flip back and forth between CNG and diesel. So if something unforeseen does happen, we're not moving exclusively from diesel to CNG. We're taking on a dual fuel capabilities, so we'll be better positioned than all the other municipalities that are only on diesel. So it provides that kind of a flexibility, so if something unforeseen does happen.
I understand that, Don, to the Chair. My issue is I just try to clearly mathematically determine, you're asking the taxpayers to us to authorize a $4.5 million expenditure differential versus CNG versus diesel. And for doing that, I want to know, in 5 years, do I see payback? Or am I looking at a neutral financial position, or am I looking at the fact that the city is further ahead?
So Jerry's going to answer this, Mr. Chairman, but if I could, if you look at the city's investment of upset limit of the $3.6 million, virtually that entire $3.6 million is saved against the operating budget or voided against the operating budget in just a little over 3 years. So barring anything else, that $3.6 million investment is returned through savings against the operating budget in a little over 3 years. Jerry was going to comment.
Okay, can you, so now it's even more confusing, because we have $4.5 million expenditure, 3.6 with the gas station. We have, and that's the differential between CNG 18 buses versus 18 diesel. And mathematically, the simple numbers are, that works out to about 5 years. And the question I've been asking, I'm not getting a straight up answer, are we going to see payback? Are we going to see that return in the 5 years? Or are we going to be investing more than we're getting in return?
I bet. And we have Mr. Davis, please.
Sorry.
So through the chair, the risk is, so the answer is yes, we get the payback by doing that, okay? The risk is, and Don and Jeff have talked about it, I think the further analysis when you do the diesel versus CNG moving forward, the fleet as it progresses, that savings on the operating may grow, may not, but it may because of that, the continual price spread. So the payback at this point in time is, I would say yes.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted a straight up answer on that. And I appreciate that. How many articulated buses we have in our fleet now, to the chair?
Through you, Mr. Chair, right now we have 25 buses in the articulated fleet.
And where are they primarily located? What routes? Are they Lower City, Mountain? Where are they?
Beeline, University.
Okay, so how many of our articulated buses are in the Lower City?
All of them.
During the weekdays, they're primarily on the King Main, Queenston corridor. On the weekends, we do have some that run on the College route and the Upper James route on weekdays as well. And on the weekends, we reassign them to like Upper Wentworth, Wellington to service them all.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand when we talk about the need for 18 or 60 articulated buses. Help me understand the math. If we're predominantly using 25 of our current articulated buses in the Lower City on those main routes to deal with the overcrowding, we've identified, I think, Barton Street as another area of growing concern. What is the actual numbers? Do they justify 18 new buses on the Barton Street stretch? Articulated buses.
Yeah, we'd certainly make use of all of them, not just the Barton route only. We would also plug some of the mainline services as well. The biggest problem we have on the Lower City routes, the Kings, the Bartons, the Cannons, is a lot of scooter use, a lot of buggies, a lot of wheelchairs, and that really takes up the capacity.
Okay, so these new 18 articulated buses would predominantly be downtown again?
That's correct.
Okay, so can I get a list of bus routes that are overcrowded? Because I know that at Upper James and West 5th, I have seniors calling me left, right, and center and talk about overcrowding of buses and can't get on it. So I just want to know if the mountain residents that have to wait are seen as lower on the priority list relative to what you're identifying now.
Yes, we can provide that.
Appreciate that. The next question regards the $3.6 million gas purchase. That's for 20 years, that arrangement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, that's basically our capital contribution. What that means is that under the contract terms that we would look to enter in with Union is that we would pay a monthly maintenance cost, a fee through our rate. Any future capital contribution that needs to be made to that station, because if something goes south at some point, that's under their cost. It's not the city cost. Where the city over the last few years, as council may recall, is had to incur significant cost in terms of maintaining our existing stations, where we've had major failure from time to time with some of the compressor stations. So what this does is it gets us out of that worry, that concern that we've had to deal with the last several years.
All I'm asking is this a 20-year agreement with Union Gas?
Correct.
And we heard through Union Gas that in the 20-year agreement they would contribute $1 million to that $3.6 million cost.
Yes.
That's not in the report. The chair. That's not reflected in the report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll take that back and review it and come back to you with all the options.
Okay. Can I ask, do we have any understanding what the markup on the natural gas is? So what's the profit margin that Union Gas would receive on every purchase of gas?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no markup on the commodity portion of the natural gas. We still buy that independently. The only profit that they make is through more gas coming through the system. But there's no additional markup that they have. In fact, the rate that we'll be getting is a better rate than we have now.
So we'll be purchasing from other providers?
That's correct. We'll still purchase from the wholesale market.
From the wholesale, okay. Who's actually operating the station? You talk about maintenance, you talk about but the actual operation.
It would be entirely hands-free to the nozzle. So we'd move from, right now, the city takes responsibility at the curb. Now the city would take responsibility for pumping the gas. So it'd be Union Gas's responsibility right up to the nozzle where our employees are putting the fuel in the buses. So Union Gas would have full responsibility to get the gas to the nozzle. And our employees obviously pump the gas.
Okay, so what do we have incorporated in this agreement that facilitates the issue between the fact that we're actually taking the nozzle and sticking it into the bus and gassing it up versus their responsibility? And if there's a gray area where a problem evolves and they point the finger at the fact the end user, our operator, is the one that caused the problem.
It actually clarifies the responsibility in my point of view, because the station maintenance is guaranteed. So any failure immediately becomes their responsibility, and their responsibility to get it corrected. We were actually suggesting or recommending this role for Union Gas is to get the city out of that business, because that's not our field of expertise. And so what this does is this transfers all the risk of failure, all the risk of cost overrun, any risk associated with those stations would transfer to Union Gas. And that's actually a benefit to the city in what's being recommended here.
Great. And my last question on that front is there any, and this is to all staff regarding this arrangement, any red flags? So any question, I can't anticipate every issue relative to what is being provided through this compression gas plant, but I'm relying on your expertise, and if you had concerns, what are those concerns?
Well, as the committee has already addressed, is the certainty. I think personally, the certainty is very strong in a 3 to 5 year period. Beyond that, it gets a little hazy. No one could have predicted what was going to happen to the price of CNG versus diesel back in about 2007, 2008. And I don't think anyone can tell you that with any degree of certainty that's not going to change again in the future. But I think that my personal view is that we will recover our entire investment and more at the very least. most importantly, it provides us with dual fuel capability, which will put us in a better position than any municipality that's pumping only diesel. And what can't be lost in all of this is the opportunity to expand beyond the transit fleet into the waste management fleet, which is in fact or any of the city fleet, for example, which is the rapidly growing market in the U.S. So I think it provides, personally, the money is going to get returned in 3 to 5 years with almost total assurance. And on top of that, we're going to have the flexibility that no other municipality will have, that we can flip back and forth from diesel to CNG at will. And so I see, frankly, very, very little downside risk for the city here. We're absolutely, with this $3.6 million investment, whether it's 2.6 or 3.6 million, what we're saying is that we can reliably, for the next 3 to 5 years, commit to committee and council that this will have, at worst case scenario, a negative impact on the operating budgets going forward. If we don't do this, we're absolutely guaranteed an operating budget impact in each of the next 2 years as we replace these 35 CNG buses.
I appreciate it.
Councillor Whitehead, Jerry Davis.
Yeah, just to add to Don's, and it's a valid question. What's going to happen out there? And with this type, commodity, there's the supply and demand, and we're trying to forecast that. And the other side, and Don's indicated, is technology and how it's evolved. So they're the issues that we're trying to forecast on. I don't know if I'd call it a red flag, but they're the things we'll continue to monitor to ensure council, whatever decision we make, going forward, we'll have that in front of you.
I appreciate it. Stands to reason if more and more uptake on CNG, especially with the larger municipalities across North America, the demand for diesel will go down, the demand for natural gas goes up, then clearly that's going to have an impact on the diesel and its pricing relative to natural gas. So it's the supply and demand, and I just want to make sure that we're not putting too much on one side of this ledger and exposing ourselves on the other side 4 or 5 years from now.
I think it's worth mentioning that in terms of overall consumption of diesel and CNG, the consumption by fleet of CNG makes up a very small incremental portion of total natural gas consumption across North America. So it would take an awful lot of shift to materially affect the market pricing on CNG versus diesel, in my view.
Great. Appreciate those are the questions I have. I'll take the chair back. Councillor Pursuit.
Thank you, Chairman Whitehead. And through you, Mr. Chairman, to Don, bottom of page 4 of 11, the last 2 sentences. Union would provide options for recovering maintenance and capital costs in the city through its rates. Exactly what does that mean?
Could perhaps either ask Jeff or the Union Gas representative.
For you, Mr. Chair, what that would mean is instead of paying a separate fee for maintenance, they would recover that fee through their distribution rate that we received at the city. So we would just include that as part of what we would call a T1 account. So it would just be that's what we mean by recovering it through the rates.
So at this point in time, we don't know what those fees will be.
At this point in time, we have a pretty good idea on what they're estimated to be. We'll know exactly what they are once they go to, if approved, once they go to market and tender for that service.
Just for clarification, Jeff, we're assuring committee today that we currently spend about $300,000 out of the operating budget. That $300,000 plus the $3.6 million is an absolute upset exposure that committee and council has over the 20-year life of the agreement we propose to negotiate. Is that
That's correct, Don.
Mr. Chairman, so what we're saying is we're going to be paying the majority of installing this fueling station for compressed natural gas. Within whatever we pay for the gas, we're going to be paying a maintenance and a capital cost to replace things down the road.
Yeah, we'll be paying the bulk majority of it through capital. Essentially, the capital would be set aside, it would fund the capital station. We currently spend about $300,000 on the existing station. What we're saying is that number would not go up. If anything, if we benefit from this, we're being very conservative. The operating budget would be unaffected. We're spending about $300,000 a year now, and that number wouldn't go up. Hopefully it would go down. But from our perspective here in their annual budgeting process, this initiative is a worst-case scenario, the $3.6 million. The existing operating budget we're spending on station maintenance is the worst-case scenario we see going forward, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Don. And once again, on top of page 5, it says essentially the CNG station becomes an extension of Union's natural gas distribution system. So does that mean that other companies, businesses could come into the bus yard and fuel up from there?
No. We wouldn't allow other operators to fuel out of the Mountain Transit Center. And certainly not without coming back to committee and council. That would present some real challenges for us. So in the beginning, absolutely not, and we wouldn't go in that direction without reporting back to committee for further direction.
Any staff want to comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I agree with Don on that. It's something that we've talked as maybe a future opportunity. The number one issue is making sure that doesn't interfere with the transit operations. If there's an opportunity to make some additional revenue for the city, we would come back and report that to committee for approval.
Okay, and then F on here, 330 Wentworth Street, shows it's going to need $300,000 in upgrades.
For you, Mr. Chair, what that is the existing station is quite aged as well. What we want to do is get that in better shape so that we can use it as a backup facility for the next 3 to 5 years until we can make some decision whether there's an economic basis worth making more of the fleet go to CNG or not. This basically buys us time to keep things operating, and it fuels our other existing natural gas fleet that we have. We just have a little bit left.
So through Mr. Chair, then, so the station, the natural gas station up at the bus station on James would have nothing to do with Union Gas, would have anything to do with the one down on Wentworth Street, part of an agreement?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, at this point, I have no other questions for staff, but at this point, I did have Councillor McCaddy who wanted to make comments. I do not see him here. Is he in the lounge? Not back. So that's the only one I had on comments. Councillor Powers, did you have any further comments you want to provide? So what is the will of committee? Councillor Powers?
I'm prepared to move the motion, but I would like item E refer back to staff for a response to a further investigation and a report back to us.
Okay, that's seconded by Councillor Merla. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
So if I could then, Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, just to go over the recommendations so we bring back because of the timing in terms of buying buses. Committee seems generally comfortable with recommendation A. It's just a question of whether it's a diesel or a CNG. Single source is entirely reliant on us reporting back on E, as are the facility upgrades and the upgrades at Wentworth Street and the long-term lease. So the sticking point is ownership. You're asking us or directing us to report back on the issue of ownership. Is that
that's Powers.
First Statement?
That's part of it. I think the fact, I guess, my question about the long-term usage of the vehicle, the question of the ownership, it's the element of the contribution, because in the report it said 3.6. We've heard Union Gas volunteer 2 points. Our from us would be 2.6, with them contributing, I'm going to call it $1 million. So we need clarity on that one. And the third issue I want is basically of the facility. Is it exclusively for HSR and our vehicles, or will it have the capacity to serve other vehicles on a commercial basis? So that's the questions that I'm asking for in that report to come back.
Is that then all the questions, Mr. Chair? Is that, I understand there's 3 clear directions.
Correct.
Is that the full direction of committee then?
Correct. That's all relative to E.
Yes.
Councillor Bell.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, Don, if you could, the information of
yes,
going
in
to
terms of the
buses and helping with the overcrowding and what the cost savings on operating, maintenance, et cetera, would be?
Okay, if we were to
Put additional buses in there?
say add 3 40-foot conventional buses versus 2 articulated buses, what the cost differential would be. Yes, we've actually done that. That's an easy turnaround as well. So four directions then, Mr. Chairman?
Correct. And mine doesn't have to be formalized. I just, if you can, forward me the list of routes that have been identified as having an overcrowding problem, especially during peak periods, pass-by, so that I have a clear understanding where and what geographic areas is affecting in the city.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. And what we'll include in that is any public feedback we've had in terms of recommendations from the public that come in through consumer complaints.
Great. Councillor Powers.
I think Dawn is clearly enunciated. I think what it is everything revolves around item E. So in other words, basically is approval in principle subject to getting the right answers and be comfortable with what we want to do with E in that. So.
Can I suggest, is there a timing issue here? And I'm trying to facilitate. I mean, clearly, this wouldn't get final approval till council anyway. So the type of information that's being asked for, is that something that the committee would be comfortable having provided through staff in an email, and then council consider the formalization, or do you want that to come here? Okay, I just thought I'd try. Okay, so we'll be coming back here. And there's any timing sensitivity?
Well, the timing is we're going to want to move on this as quickly as possible, and I anticipate we can move on it quickly as possible. I don't think there's anything overly complicated in terms of the response. I think what you're looking for is to raise your level of knowledge and understanding of, ownership. The whole, is it 3.6 million or 2.6 million, and why doesn't the city just own it itself? I think we understand very clearly, and I think we can turn that around very quickly. The timing issue is with the purchase of our 2014 buses. It's unlikely that even if we purchase now, we'd get them in 2014. So as time moves on, we are adding budget pressure to our 2015 operating budget. But
so we're looking at a 3-week time frame versus a 1-week time frame for a formal approval of item E.
Yeah, I'm seeing everyone nodding yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. So that's already been proved. Did I call the question? I believe I did.
There is no May 5th meeting, May 22nd. Just wanted to point that out.
Sorry, May
22nd.
That's right. So we didn't have there wasn't enough to go forward before May 22nd. So it's actually an additional two-week period we're talking about here. Okay, is that okay? Yep. Okay, and it's already been the question's already been called, but we'll do it again. All those in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So we have 7.3, transit bus stops accessibility review. Councillor Marula. Well, hang on. We have a presentation respecting transit buses. Do you want to hear the presentation?
I'm comfortable with not hearing a presentation, but I'll leave it up to committee members.
Are you? Is committee comfortable in passing on the presentation and going straight to questions? Councillor Powers.
I'm comfortable with it. The background report, I think, was very, very informative and illustrative. So I think I certainly could support Councillor
Okay, so let's move waiving the presentation. Moved by Councillor Power, second by Councillor Marilla. All those in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Carried. Now I recognize Councillor Marilla for the first questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through you to Jerry. Jerry, I think this item is very important in many ways. And I think when we look at this in isolation of bus stops, it's one envelope of a larger, briefcase of issues surrounding AODA. And when we're looking at this issue and the costs associated with what our requirements as a city will be in the future, this particular issue that's before us is very, minimal compared to what we're going to be subjected to down the road with respect to accessibility. Because AODA legislation is all-encompassing when it comes to accessibility issues. So now we're in a position where we've been asked to put forward guidelines but we're legislated to do that. And at present, only monies that are available to us are those that we tax for at the general levy, which is regressive in nature. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I know, I'm not sure if it was a year ago or perhaps two, I believe I asked Mr. Zagaric for an assessment of what the potential costs will be for us as a city when we're incorporating all aspects of accessibility, publicly owned buildings and so on, and that of what's going to be expected of the private sector. Because through you, Mr. Chairman, to Jerry, there's a private sector component here that I think most private sector people aren't aware of what they're going to be subjected to cost-wise upon a complaint being lodged against them, not too dissimilar to us as a city. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Jerry, could you just elaborate on the difference between legislation, regulations, guidelines, and what's going to be expected of us corporate-wide and that of the private sector as well, and the fact that there isn't a national strategy to deal with this where it belongs as a result of it being a human rights issue. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Jerry. It's a very loaded question, but I'll allow you the flexibility to elaborate.
So through the chair, I'll talk on some, and then Don can talk on what we've done with respect to transportation. The AOD legislation that was passed, and it deals, and you are 100% correct, it deals with the municipal form out there, sidewalks, roadways, and everything. And so when we reconstruct infrastructure, we go to the guideline to physically do all of it. I think Mike Zagaric reported it was in the millions. So we're meeting the legislation as we reconstruct, and that adds a cost to it. The other side is that when we renovate a building, and this is the perfect example, there's an accessibility code for the Ontario Building Code and then there's what we call the barrier-free design guideline, which is full. Any new building, it's fully added in, and that's a significant undertaking. But when it's a new building, it's part of the plan, so that's standard. The private sector, I would think, are going to be subjected to exactly what we are in that they have to comply. I don't know how the complaints are driven in the event you don't meet it, but they will be faced with the same thing. And so it's a staggering number, but it's not so much the number as it is the expectation. Like, we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to solve it overnight. So we are doing it piecemeal. And I think the bus stops that Christine's report talks about that is a perfect example in that. And we sit on the transportation subcommittee of the ACPD to work with them. So, there's two things. One, the actual legislation to comply with it is it's staggering in cost if you had to retrofit everything. It also requires a cooperation in moving forward, in that the expectation is what has to be managed. The money is significant, but from our perspective in doing capital projects and facilities, it's the expectation. We get that. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but it's a significant undertaking, but it's very important. And that, I think, working with the groups, that's what we understand completely.
And just trying to pinpoint, because having been involved with this since the mid-90s, before the legislation was even enacted, the intent was to simply have legislation so that ultimately every able-bodied person that has access to a building any person with a disability would be able to access a building as simply as one that's able-bodied. So that's the ultimate goal, is that there is no barrier for anybody with a disability. That's the stars that we're shooting for. But in saying that, it is a work in progress and a work that's in flux, and will take decades to be fully compliant for the private and public sector. But my concern at present is that the lack of understanding of the significance of this from a financial perspective from the private sector as well as the public sector, and the fact that we do not have a national strategy to deal with this suggests to me that, again, we have higher levels of government imposing legislation that I fully support, I know this council supports, but it is unaffordable and unsustainable unless we deal with it from a progressive tax issue, and that being the provincial and federal government. So through you, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do today, and use this as an opportunity or as a catalyst to highlight this, because the ignorance out in the community, and I mean that in the true sense of the word, people being unaware of this particular issue is as staggering as the cost will be to this community and to the private sector. So I think we need a campaign of trying to increase awareness, eliminate the ignorance surrounding it, and truly, in a very flashpoint, simplify it so people understand it. And right now, because there's not that understanding about it. So through you, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to move an initiative accordingly, that we have a formal campaign accordingly to firstly determine how staggering it will be for private and public sector, but also a communications plan through Mike Kirkopoulos and Mr. Murray's office and Jerry's communication staff. So at the appropriate time, I'll do that. But I think it's really an opportunity today to use this as a catalyst to highlight the importance of this and really the challenges that we're going to be faced with in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, I don't have any other speakers. Councillor Duval.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and you to Jerry or Jim, whoever wants to answer this. If we look on page 8 of our presentation, slide, and I guess in the yellow copy it's on page 4. I want everybody to take a look at the pictures there of the phase 1 audit highlights with the 3 stops and rural road cross sections. It's affecting Rimo Road and also across from Walmart. Everybody have that? Picture? Okay, so my question is, yes, thank you. My question is, those stops were put there temporarily at the time when we did the pilot program on Rimo Road, when we first put the bus in there. They've never changed. Okay, some have on Rimo. We have nice little platforms. These, and if you look at the picture, it is absolutely impossible to get to the sidewalk. What that area is a ditch full of mud on both sides, and when it snows out, the plowing, it's impossible for the person to get over to the sidewalk unless having to walk a great long distance to get to the nearest corner to get around. So when I see this and then I see the audit result that the rural cross sections will be retrofitted at time of urbanization, I'm having a hard time understanding that when Rimo Road, this section of Rimo Road won't be done till 2020. These people, our seniors, have made many complaints of saying we need access into there, or the people with buggies, children. Is there any way we can even do a temporary measure to put that into the urbanization as going forward? Because we've done it in other sections of Rimo, but we haven't done it in some of these areas.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the portions of Rimo Road, there are some portions of Rimo Road that are still rural section that have sidewalk. Those sections we can accommodate. You can link up the stop to the sidewalk. There's other portions of Rimo Road that are truly rural that do not have sidewalk. The sections from Dartnell Road to Fletcher is going to urbanization this year. As far as I remember my capital budget, I believe the section from Fletcher out to 20, full urbanization follows that either a year or 2 later. So everything east of Dartnell will be fully urbanized by 17, I believe, is the projection. We have urbanization planned from West 5th to Garth. 16, and from Garth to Paradise in 17 and beyond.
on in 19 or 20, which will basically give us full urbanization for most of the length of Rymel Road and or have available sidewalk. So there are plans there. They are in what we would call the immediate future, given our current funding levels and priorities.
Okay, I'm not sure if that answered my question. I understand the urbanization part, especially going to the east end, and some is actually going to happen in the west end, but in the middle portion, it's not going to be done, I believe, till 2019, 2020. Is that correct? Unless you can surprise me, Jerry, with something sooner.
Most of the other portions have, if they're not fully urbanized, like the section between Wellington and Wentworth, at least on the north side, have fully available sidewalks that we can get a stop to, so we can coordinate with Don if there are some of those missing and have a look at those. We were talking the other day about on the eastbound one at Upper Wentworth there. It's a typical type of one.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, there's a couple of them. They do have sidewalks where they can actually go across. I understand, if we can't do it right away, waiting for urbanization, but that's a long time out. Even the temporary, something, I don't care if it's asphalt, but somehow the people have got to get across and get access to that sidewalk instead of going through the ditch. So the sooner the better on that. And not only did I notice it on near Upper Wentworth and Rymel, but even going to, if you're going east to Sherman, even some of it goes into Councillor Jackson's ward, where they need some attention. I mean, we just can't have people saying, here you go, and you're into a ditch. Just mobility problems for everybody, especially in the winter.
We're looking for a commitment to, even before those areas are actually urbanized, a stopgap of providing asphalt path to provide greater access to those stops.
So through you, Mr. Chair, what we're recommending in this information report is, now that we've audited the first 28 stops that the ACPD member brought forward, that we do a full citywide audit and we look at all of the stops. So what we can do when we look at all of the stops is have a look at those other stops. And this was just a sampling that she brought forward of some of the stops on Rymel Road. So we can look at all of those stops and consult with Gary's staff and identify those which we can come up with some interim solutions for as part of the citywide audit.
Yeah, I think Councillor Duval was asking for some quick wins, and I think these have already been identified in the original 28. The pictures are here.
We'll work with the council. We hear you loud and clear. We'll go out there. We'll look at it. We'll get an interim. We'll address it.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And Jim, I think I left you an email just waiting for what we can do to get something going, because I do have a lot of seniors that are really concerned. The elements of out there, they're freezing, their water, they're being splashed. They need something to help them out. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Merla.
On the motion?
Yep.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Collins, that the City of Hamilton reaffirm our strong support of the AOD legislation, that a resolution be that a resolution be passed advocating a national and provincial strategy a funding formula be established to expedite full compliance of AODA legislation, and that a letter be sent to the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Ontario, and that the staff report back to committee on the actual staggering financial implications of a full compliance, both from a public perspective, but also seek out an assessment of the private sector implications.
Wow. That was moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that particular motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Now, on the staff report, they are looking for direction to go with the citywide audit. So I need to, it doesn't say receive, Madam Chair, but because there is direction here. It's an information report, but you're still looking for direction to do a further audit, correct?
So through the chair, we will we're going to proceed with that audit, and then we're going to address the immediate concerns
Okay,
with the
so we just need to
councillors.
receive it.
Yeah.
Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Powers. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So at this point, I have my mountain colleague, I believe, Councillor DeVal. You have a motion. Notice of motion.
There's two notices of motion, but I'd like to waive the rules. One is for timing.
Second by Councillor Jackson. All those in favor of waiving the rules for both motions? For both motions, do this once.
Yes.
All those in favor? Carried.
So the first one is for a playground at Carrara Park. That's a needed playground area. It's been well used, but I mean, it's been 20 years old even before it has any care. I'm wanting to take that money out of my area rating fund to spruce it up.
Second. Oh, it's on the second.
Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Carried. Second one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the second one is what a tree removal at 269 Eaglewood. I have sent staff.
Yes. Move it.
Move it to second by Councillor Powers. Thank you very much,
To
Councillor.
remove the tree, Eaglewood Drive, 269 Eaglewood Drive. Okay, you can speak to it now.
Okay, thank you. And this is, I've had staff come up and take a look at this. This tree is a real nuisance in the area. It's caused a lot of damage. He's constantly out there raking up some twigs, branches. We've been cutting the tree. The crown of the root has come out of the ground. It's hurting his landscaping. It's not that he doesn't want a tree. He'd like to have this tree removed. We can replace the tree, but it's really become a nuisance and the people are very frustrated.
Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
At this point, we have outstanding business list. Moved by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Jackson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. No private confidential. May I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Carried.